Chapter 1696. Divine flames fell from the sky above the Karma Star Protection Formation. Phoenix Little Huang rushed over to Su Xiaolan's side and began to tremble uncontrollably. It didn't dare to face Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming anymore. Even the Dark Thunder Emperor had been slain by a single sword strike from Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming, so it would be no different from a frail chicken. Phoenixes possessed very powerful life force and regenerative abilities. At the very least, the wing that had been sliced off by Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming had already been completely healed, but that was about it. Little Huang knew that if the World Creation Sword were to strike its body, it would be doomed. In fact, it wouldn't even have a chance to be reborn as an egg. Su Xiaolan was very forgiving toward Little Huang's cowardice. Little Huang, just hide behind me. Inject all of your power into the spell formation, and we'll fight together. Little Huang was almost moved to tears upon hearing this. Even though Master Xiaolan was a little fierce normally, she was still very gentle and reliable in times of need. Right at this moment, a man in a purple imperial robe appeared in the distance. "Enlin, Su Xiaolan, I'm here to help you." Emperor Ziwei also rushed into the Karma Star Protection Formation. Xiao Fu was naturally very welcoming. "Hurry, give me all of your power." This petite and adorable array spirit naturally had her own plans. If all of the cultivators with a combat prowess of 5 were to fight against a cultivator with a combat prowess of 10, they would naturally be crushed one by one. However, if a few cultivators with a combat prowess of 5 were to rush into the spell formation and inject all of their power into it, they would be able to maximize the effectiveness of their power. Perhaps they would even be able to fight against Wu Ming with a combat prowess of 10. Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake had clearly realized this as well. After Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming insta-killed the Dark Thunder Emperor, they had already transformed into 2 streaks of light, one black and one white, before flying toward Enlin's spell formation. They weren't going to admit that they had been scared by Enlin. They were only choosing the best way to deal with him. "Senior Enlin, we're here to protect you." White Spirit Snake wiped the blood from the corners of her lips and spoke with a joyful expression. She had just experienced an intense battle. Black Spirit Snake harumphed lightly and didn't say anything. Instead, she took the initiative to inject her power into the Karma Star Protection Formation. The Karma Star Protection Formation activated with all its might. With the powers of Su Xiaolan, the Phoenix, Emperor Ziwei, Black Spirit Snake, and White Spirit Snake, as well as the pinnacle divine tool Xiao Fu, the 7 stars of the Big Dipper erupted with unprecedented light. Xiao Fu still didn't seem to be satisfied, and she looked up into the sky. "Little fatty, this is the most important battle. Master is about to die, so I need your power." The sky trembled slightly. A river of stars that stretched across the entire sky with no end in sight appeared. It was clearly daytime, but now a starry sky appeared, and even the world suddenly darkened. The starless sky of Annihilation Formation, which had been lying dormant, was finally activated again. However, this time, the Milky Way was no longer a murderous red star. Instead, it was a fair and chubby little baby falling from the starry sky. He was the formation spirit of the starless sky of Annihilation Formation. Xiao Fu had allowed this little fatty to enter her formation, and Enlin's heart immediately leaped into his throat. One had to realize that these 2 formation discs were like fire and water, and they would fight each other as soon as they met. Enlin had been through a lot in the past. Now that the 2 of them were about to join forces, what was going to happen? Little fatty curled up like a baby before Enlin's eyes, and he became rounder and rounder before finally transforming into a ball. To put it more accurately, he had transformed into a small white planet. Right at this moment, Wu Ming had already charged into the area within 150 kilometers of the formation. "Enlin, you're dead for sure this time." A crazed expression appeared on her face, and she plunged a hand into the air before slowly pulling out a sword that was shimmering with pure light. Boundless sword intent rocked the entire heaven and earth. Blood flowed into the sword. A white feather dress appeared on her body again, making her appear holy and otherworldly. and Lin couldn't help but gulp. This lunatic really could unleash another attack. The scenes of Heavenly Disciple Candidate, the Dark Thunder Emperor's death, were still fresh in his mind. Was it finally time for him to face this terrifying sword strike head-on? He knew that this sword strike was definitely aimed at him. Countless cracks had already appeared on Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's divine halo of light. However, she couldn't fall just yet. She still had one last mission, and that was to kill Lin as well as all of the people around him. Now that everyone had gathered together and hid within the formation, Wu Ming was doing exactly what she wanted. She would be able to kill all of them in one fell swoop. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming quickly rushed toward Lin and the others as she prepared to unleash her Sword of Light. Lin knew that this next attack was not a ballistic attack. Instead, it was a 360-degree attack that had no blind spots. The black brick and frying pan were completely useless against it. The battle had finally reached its most perilous juncture. Xiao Fu kicked the white star that little fatty had transformed into to the forefront. Dubhi Merak, Fekta, Migrez, Alioth, Mizar Alcade, Galaxy of Stars, heed my command, materialized the 8 extreme star desolate realm. Countless star patterns appeared on Xiao Fu's body before expanding to encompass the entire formation. They then passed through the formation and spread throughout the entire Earth. The scene before Lin's eyes changed. Heaven and earth around him had transformed into a boundless starry sky with countless stars, rivers of stars, and a series of spectacular realm of stars. Profound and ancient, vast and boundless. The most dazzling 7 stars of the Big Dipper were situated in different parts of the starry sky, as if all of the power of stars in the entire starry sky had been injected into Little Fatty's body. Little Fatty had become the brightest star in the night sky. Lin was astonished. Xiao Fu was currently using a very peculiar formation. No, it couldn't even be called a formation as it had already exceeded the scope of a formation. This was the 8 extreme star desolate realm, a realm that could keep all laws at bay. Heavenly God Technique, Heaven and Earth Creation Sword, Origin. A clear cry sounded, and Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's sword fell. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming didn't care what technique her opponent was using. All she knew was that no one would be able to block her sword strike. A streak of light hurtled directly toward the 8 extreme star desolate realm. It was like the arc of the moon, but it was also like the origin of all things. It was imbued with great fortune and hope. In the beginning, it was only a speck of starlight, as if it were the origin of everything and contained countless possibilities. Then it grew larger and larger. That's right, even though it was very weak in the beginning, it was boundless in the end. It was also at this moment that Little Fatty's aura had also accumulated to its peak, and light pierced through the starry sky as it crashed directly toward the sword strike. Heaven and earth suddenly fell silent for a split second. What followed was an earth-shattering explosion. Boom! Light erupted from the collision of the 2 attacks, blinding the Celestial Arch and the others for a brief moment. Destructive energy instantly proliferated for several hundred kilometers, annihilating all things, and the shock waves from the collision caused the Earth to tremor and crack open for over 10,000 kilometers. The Dark Thunder Emperor was completely unable to withstand Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's most powerful attack, so the resulting shock waves weren't all that powerful. However, Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's Heaven and Earth Creation Sword had met its match this time, and it could be said that the resulting shock waves were truly earth-shattering. At the center of the explosion, the 2 balls of power were still clashing in a frenzy. Chapter 1697. At the center of the clash of energies. Lin had never experienced a power like this before. He was greeted by a boundless expanse of light. It looked harmless, and one would even want to approach it. However, it would take everything away from you. As soon as you approached it, you would be reduced to specks of light and disappear from this world. This power was extremely terrifying. It could be hope, but it could also be the most terrifying form of despair. It could bestow light upon you and turn you into light. Wasn't that terrifying? Thankfully, and Lin was situated within the 8 Extremes desolate realm, where he was protected by a large expanse of starry sky, so he wouldn't be assimilated by the terrifying light. The little ball absorbed the power of the entire formation and stood at the forefront of the formation, frantically defending against the corrosive power of the outside world. The 8 Extremes desolate realm could keep out all laws, but the power before it was the power of the paramount laws of the heavenly Tao. Sure enough, cracks soon began to appear on the little ball. Countless specks of light crashed into it in a frenzy, and Lin's heart was in his throat. Bam! A dull thump erupted. The little ball exploded. It reverted back to a chubby little boy. Everyone's pupils contracted upon seeing this. At this moment, the little boy spread open his arms and pushed them forward. Boundless light had already pierced through the entire starry sky, engulfing heaven and earth. Only their location was still isolated by a protective barrier, but it was already trembling uncontrollably under the onslaught of the light. It could even be said that it was on the verge of exploding at any moment. However, the light before them continued to pour forth as if there was no end to it. The creation of heaven and earth was the process of creating something from nothing and from something to infinity. The more obstructions it faced, the more powerful it would become, until it destroyed its opponent. This characteristic of this spell technique struck despair into Lin and the others. Cracks began to appear on the 8 Extremes desolate realm. The 8 Extremes desolate realm was unable to keep out the paramount laws of the heavenly Tao in the end. A wisp of light shot into the formation, and the formation tremored violently. Su Xiaolan, Goldie, Emperor Zui, Black Spirit Snake, and White Spirit Snake had injected all of their power into the formation, and they were one with it. Now that the formation was violently shattered, all 5 of them were severely wounded by the backlash and threw up mouthfuls of blood. But this was not the worst. The most terrifying thing would be when the light that tore through the array enveloped and engulfed everyone. Almost everyone felt that their breathing had slowed by half a beat. A thought rose in everyone's mind. It was over. They were done for. But suddenly, the expected scene of him being devoured by the light did not appear. The boundless light in front of him suddenly disappeared. Furthermore, it had disappeared without any warning. Heaven and earth seemed to have suddenly fallen into darkness. It was as if a very bright light bulb had suddenly been extinguished, and everything in front of them would turn dark. Actually, it was not that night had descended, but because compared to the light from before, the light now was indeed very dim. In front of Lin, Fatty was already lying on the ground. Xiao Fu was also lying feebly at the center of the formation, looking as if her body were about to collapse. As for their enemy, Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming, her entire body was riddled with cracks, and all of her divine halos had become dim and colorless. The divine halo above her head had also been reduced to dust. How could this be? I was so close, so close. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming murmured to herself with an indignant expression. She wanted to use her power, but her body refused to obey her commands. She had become an extremely frail and fragile woman, as if a gust of wind would be able to knock her over. She was so pitiful that no one wanted to hurt her, and Lin rushed forward and slapped her across the face. Slap! Boom! Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming was slapped to the ground. You! Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming exploded with rage, and her eyes widened. Die! Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming. And Lin pulled out his evil-slaying sword. How can a firefly compete with the moon? Opposing me will only result in death. And Lin, you shameless be *starred. Do you have any shame? Why weren't you so brave before? You've been hiding behind a bunch of people this entire time, and when I'm completely defenseless, you jump out and bully me. Despicable. Shameless. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming was slapped to the ground, but she still let loose a torrent of abuse. You have the gall to say that? Didn't you also bully me when I was completely defenseless? And Lin chuckled coldly. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's body shuddered, and she almost choked on her words. And Lin shot a glance at Wu Ming, who was sprawled on the ground. Her white cloud robe clung tightly to her slender and flawless figure, and her long green hair was a little disheveled and clung to her snowy white neck. She was clearly a little nervous and enraged, and her chest rose and fell violently. "What are you looking at? If you're going to kill me, then kill me." Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming gritted her teeth. She was sprawled on the ground, and she was being looked down upon by Enlin, and she was struck by an unprecedented sense of humiliation. One had to realize that she was one of the most powerful beings in the heavenly human tribe, the most regal and powerful living being acknowledged by the heavenly Tao. How could she be treated like this by a mortal? How could she be stomped into the ground by Enlin? And then, she really was stomped into the ground. Enlin stepped on her soft, slender waist and grabbed on her green, curly hair with one hand. Then, he slashed his sword toward her neck with the other. "Sorry, I haven't recovered from my injuries yet, so I can only land the killing blow in the most direct way." Enlin, you be *starred. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming gritted her teeth, and tears of humiliation flowed from her eyes. She was like a chicken waiting to be slaughtered, and even chickens had to be slashed by the neck like this. Enlin didn't say anything, and his evil-slaying sword sliced through Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's neck with ease. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's body shuddered, and her body crumbled at an even faster rate before disintegrating into specks of white light a few seconds later. "Sigh, it's over," and Lin heaved a forlorn sigh as he stood on the spot. He looked at his comrades, who had been severely wounded by the backlash from the spell formation, and he sighed with emotion. At the same time, he was rejoicing, but at the same time, he was also filled with lingering fear. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's combat prowess had far exceeded his expectations. His assessment of the combat prowess of Divine Heaven Stage Heavenly Humans was most likely going to have to be revised once again. During that battle with Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu, he really hadn't experienced the ultimate power of a heavenly god due to all of the coincidences he had encountered. As for Heavenly God Jordan, his battle with Chun Shun was even more difficult. The disparity between the two of them was simply too vast, and Heavenly God Jordan had been completely crushed. It was exactly because of this that in Lin's assessment of the combat prowess of Divine Heaven Stage Heavenly Humans was a little off. He was definitely not going to be like that anymore. He already knew just how terrifying a Divine Heaven Stage Heavenly God could be, and Lin shook his head. So be it. At the very least, the outcome was still a good one. The God-slaying team had accomplished another major feat. They had successfully executed Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming. Chapter 1698. And Lin returned to Su Xiaolan's side. "Are you all right, Xiaolan?" "I'm fine. I'll be fine after some rest." Su Xiaolan shook her head and swallowed an immortal pill before sitting down to meditate. Emperor Ziwei was extremely elated. "Ha! We've slain another powerful enemy." Little Huang also flapped its wings with elation. "Chirp, chirp, chirp. We're quite lucky too." Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's backlash just happened to be over. A faint smile appeared on Black Spirit Snake's face. Of course, she should have anticipated this outcome after using that spell technique twice in a row. "We've finally avenged the Dark Thunder Emperor." White Spirit Snake interlaced her fingers in front of her chest and looked up at the empty sky. She murmured a few words to herself before coiling up her snake tail and sitting down to recover from her injuries. Everyone was severely wounded at this moment, so they gathered together to recover. And Lin had a companion now. Little Fatty was the most severely wounded, and he transformed back into a plate before disappearing into Lin's storage ring. Meanwhile, Xiao Fu was barely breathing as she converted the Karma Star Protection Formation into a healing formation, using the power of the stars to heal everyone. It had to be said that she was very considerate and considerate. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's death boosted the morale of the god-slaying team once again. In contrast, the heavenly gods were feeling extremely dejected. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming's death was within their expectations. After all, even heavenly gods who used their 9th divine halo would be killed by the backlash. However, they were very disappointed that Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming didn't kill Lin and the others. If things continued like this, they would most likely lose. The heavenly illusion god felt like it couldn't defeat the battling Buddha. The heavenly soul god couldn't defeat the ancient dragon empress either. They could only pin their hopes on heavenly god Long Kuei. Enlin and the others were already severely wounded and wouldn't be able to fight for a while. As long as heavenly god Long Kuei took care of the celestial arch, chaotic element martial lord, and Dongfang Zhuangshi, he would be able to kill Enlin and the others with ease. After that, heavenly god Long Kuei would be able to come and help them. In other words, the most crucial turning point in this battle was heavenly god Long Kuei's battle. As long as heavenly god Long Kuei won, they would be able to win. I'm counting on you. Long Kuei, the heavenly soul god, and the heavenly illusion god both turned toward heavenly god Long Kuei. Heavenly god Long Kuei was clearly aware that he had a heavy responsibility on his shoulders, and he was no longer targeting Enlin. Instead, he was going to kill these three enemies first. However, killing these three enemies was easier said than done. The Celestial Arch, the chaotic element martial lord, and Dongfang Zhuangshi were all super mighty figures at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. They were the most powerful beings in their respective territories, or even tribes, so none of them were pushovers. The exquisite jade pestle in the celestial Thearcha's hand was clearly a miraculous artifact that could allow him to resonate with the power of heaven to the greatest extent, thereby allowing his strength to skyrocket. If heavenly god Long Kuei didn't unleash his full power, he wouldn't even be able to kill the celestial arch, let alone all three of them. Was he going to use that move? A hesitant expression appeared on heavenly god Long Kuei's face as he fought the celestial arch. He thought back to heavenly goddess Wu Ming's ordeal, and he immediately shook his head. No, I can't use cannons to kill mosquitoes. Otherwise, I won't be able to help the heavenly gods, even if I kill the celestial arch and Enlin. Heavenly god Long Kuei's current condition was even worse than heavenly goddess Wu Ming's, and he could only unleash the world creation sword once at most. Hence, he was going to save his only trump card for the ancient dragon empress. Heavenly god Long Kuei clashed with the celestial arch again, and the space within a radius of over 50 kilometers was instantly shattered. Heavenly god Long Kuei's arm was slightly fractured by the peerlessly powerful collision, and his body flew back through the air. The celestial arch wasn't having a good time either. Blood trickled from the corners of his lips, and his hand that was holding the jade pestle trembled slightly. Heavenly god Long Kuei was very reassured upon seeing this. The celestial Thearcha's jade pestle most likely had a time limit, and the time limit was almost up. All he had to do was hold on for a while longer. At this moment, a gargantuan ball of blood appeared in the sky. A sea of blood surged violently. Heaven-crushing blood ball. The demonic blood, Kirin abruptly hurled the ball of blood. The ball of blood fell from the sky with astonishing killing intent and baleful aura. Heaven and earth were instantly transformed into a living hell, as if countless dead souls were wailing with anguish and countless wraiths were pouncing toward it. If any other divine beast were to witness such a scene, their faces would turn pale and they would be horrified. However, this was nothing to heavenly god Long Kuei. He merely unleashed a fist toward the ball of blood, upon which a burst of white light purified all of the baleful aura and blood before disintegrating the gargantuan ball of blood. In the next instant, the demonic blood Kirin was greeted by the sight of heavenly god Long Kuei appearing before him. Crap! The demonic blood Kirin's body shuddered, and his sharp claws transformed into crimson lightning that tore toward the man before him. Heaven-crushing Kirin claw. However, before the claws had even landed, heavenly god Long Kuei's fist had already fallen. Bam! The fist of light exploded. The Kirin's massive head was instantly blasted apart. The demonic blood Kirin didn't even get a chance to let loose a wail of anguish before his body plummeted to the ground. Mr. Dongfang. The celestial Thearcha's expression shifted drastically as he hurriedly rushed over to his rescue. Heavenly god Long Kuei's brows furrowed slightly. What a tenacious life force. He finally understood why heavenly goddess Wu Ming had chosen to use the world creation sword. Even if she could crush an enemy of this caliber, it would still take her a long time to kill them. What they lacked the most was time. The demonic blood Kieran's decapitated body was enshrouded by a vast expanse of demonic blood, upon which a new head grew out. Even though its aura had diminished significantly, it was still alive. Heavenly God, Long Kuei, felt like he had to explode its head at least twice in order to kill it. At this moment, the celestial Thearcha's attack descended again. Heavenly God Long Kuei could only fight again. "Ha! Come, fight me another 300 rounds." The celestial Tharch chortled with glee as he continued to unleash attacks toward Heavenly God Long Kuei, as if he was going to keep this up forever. At this time, the primordial chaos Martial Venerate also ran over. Just like Heavenly God Long Kuei, the chaotic element Martial Lord also liked to fight with his fists. Furthermore, he became more and more powerful as he battled, and he was also an extremely troublesome opponent. Troublesome? It was really troublesome. Why was it so difficult to deal with? The more Heavenly God Long Kuei fought, the more he was tempted to unleash his most powerful attacks. However, a moment later, heaven and earth suddenly tremored violently as a peculiar silence fell over the world. The grief of heaven and earth phenomenon conjured up by the 5-Dao integration stage, super mighty figures disappeared. Their divine Tao true intent had already blessed the countless living beings in the divine mirror world, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that they had become fertilizer for all of them. Heaven and earth became even more vast and boundless. The air also became clearer, making people feel relaxed and happy. Regardless of whether it was Heavenly God Long Kuei, the Heavenly Soul God, the Celestial Tharch, or the Battling Buddha, all of their battle intent quickly dissipated, as if fighting at a time like this would be extremely disrespectful. They were going to welcome this glorious moment with peace. Unlin seemed to have sensed this, and an elated expression appeared on his face. The Divine Mirror World has been successfully upgraded. Chapter 1699. The most glorious moment for the Divine Mirror World had arrived. The entire world rejoiced. No war. Peace. This was a command conveyed by the subconsciousness of the Heavenly Tao. Heavenly God, Long Kuei's lips twitched, and he almost threw up a mouthful of blood. Back when the Divine Mirror World was being upgraded, this world wanted nothing more than for them to fight until their brains bled so that they could use the feedback from their Tao integration stage deaths to make their breakthroughs. Now that the upgrade had been completed, you're telling me you want peace? How could you be so shameless? Of course, there was no point in trying to reason with this world. This was not a decision made by Goddess of Creation Tina. This was the will of the Heavenly Tao conveyed by the subconsciousness of the entire Divine Mirror World. You can fight, but not now. The rumbling sound and the sorrowful melody between heaven and earth had already disappeared. In their place was the beautiful sound of the Great Tao. This indescribable sound washed over the countless living beings in this world, as if a pair of gentle hands were caressing their bodies. Unlin was also experiencing the same feeling. His entire body was warm and extremely comfortable, and even the rate at which he was recovering from his injuries had improved significantly. Right at this moment, iridescent light spread over the entire sky of the Divine Mirror World, creating a dazzling spectacle. From there, Unlin could see the history of the Divine Mirror World. He could see the struggles and growth of many tribes, as well as the pursuit of Tao by different living beings. The entire civilization of the Divine Mirror World was displayed within the iridescent light. Unlin, the Celestial Tharch, and the others were all deeply moved. This experience was undoubtedly extremely beneficial to their understanding of their own Tao. Heavenly God Long Kuei gritted his teeth with rage. He didn't have much time left, and he didn't want to look at all this nonsense. All he wanted to do was hammer his enemies to death. However, if he were to attack now, he would definitely suffer a backlash from the Heavenly Tao. The Divine Mirror World couldn't allow battle to take place during this glorious moment. Unlin, Su Xiaolan, the Celestial Tharch, Dongfeng Zhuangshi, and the others were still appreciating everything that had happened after the upgrade. Time passed by second, and heavenly god Long Kuei was on the verge of tears. If things continued like this, he was going to be screwed. When would it end? When would it end? The more time passed, the closer he was to death, and there was no turning back. If he were to die from the backlash before he could even recover, wouldn't that be a terrible loss? Why am I so unlucky? Why am I so unlucky? Heavenly god Long Kuei was about to throw up blood from rage. However, this was not the worst part. Two holes suddenly appeared in the sky, full of multicolored light. Following that, a golden pillar of light descended from the sky. It was as if two huge waves of light and hope had fallen to the ground, landing on Enlin and Su Xiaolan. Enlin and Su Xiaolan were startled at first, but then ecstasy appeared on their faces. Every time the world leveled up, there would be a blessing ceremony. It contained the fortune of the entire world's metamorphosis. After obtaining the complete realm core, the divine mirror world had leveled up, and Tina's blessing had allowed Xiao Hong to progress from the soul formation stage to the return to void stage. Dabai and Little Goo's cultivation bases had also improved significantly. This time, the divine mirror world leveled up, and as the goddess of creation, Tina bestowed her blessing upon Enlin and Su Xiaolan without any hesitation. Countless Tao intents instantly surged into Enlin and Su Xiaolan's minds, broadening their horizons. Their perspective of the world had changed from that of an individual to that of a whole, allowing them to look at every corner of the world. This was the vision of a goddess. Every lowly life form, every gust of wind, every fragrance, every mountain, river, ocean, vital energy flow, the aura of life, the existence of all Tao, the dazzling sun that illuminated the world, the vast and boundless night sky, the transformations of billions of living beings. He could see everything in a panoramic view. A living being's vision could affect a living being's comprehension of the Tao. Everything that Enlin and Su Xiaolan were experiencing right now was definitely a massive opportunity for them on their path to Tao. It could even be said that this was an unprecedented opportunity. They were already immersed in this wondrous realm. They didn't even notice that their injuries were recovering at an extremely terrifying rate. Enlin and Su Xiaolan's external injuries had already healed, and their internal injuries were also quickly healing. They would most likely make a complete recovery after this blessing. Not only that, but their energy was also quickly being replenished, and they would most likely return to their peak condition very soon. Enlin and Su Xiaolan had yet to notice all of this. However, there was no way that heavenly god Long Kuei hadn't noticed this. It would have been better if he hadn't seen it, but the moment he did, he nearly exploded with rage. F***CK. First, he said he wanted peace, and now he was giving Enlin and Su Xiaolan a hack. This was going too far. This was going too far. Heavenly god Long Kuei was enraged. He couldn't delay any longer. If things continued like this, they really were going to lose. Bam! A burst of light flashed, and heavenly god Long Kuei tore through the air toward Enlin. The subconscious will of the heavenly Tao was saying, "So what if we want peace? I'm about to die, so why would I be afraid of your backlash?" As long as he could kill Enlin and the others before the backlash arrived, he would still have a chance to win. That's right, heavenly god Long Kuei was taking a gamble. He was taking a gamble that the backlash of the heavenly Tao wouldn't be as fast as him. He had to turn the tables during this period of time. Whoosh! Heavenly god Long Kuei tore through space and hurtled through the air at an extremely terrifying speed. Everything had happened far too abruptly, and no one had expected Long Kuei to attack at a time like this. The Celestial Arch was the first to react, and he immediately intercepted Long Kuei. However, he was no match for the well-prepared Long Kuei, and he was blasted flying with blood gushing from his mouth. Celestial the Arch Long Kuei broke through the encirclement set up by the three super mighty figures in an extremely violent manner before charging toward Enlin. He plunged a hand into the air and pulled out a pure white longsword without any hesitation. The power of light instantly lit up heaven and earth, unleashing boundless light. Blood gushed forth from his palm as a sacrifice to the sword, and a white robe of light appeared over his body. Enlin and Su Xiaolan only came to their senses at this moment, and they were greeted by the sight of Long Ke standing over 500 kilometers away. He had already raised a sword in his hand, and the sword was imbued with earth-shattering might. Holy F asterisk CK. Enlin's expression shifted drastically. He dares to attack. Su Xiaolan was both shocked and remorseful. They had been far too careless and focused on the blessings of the divine mirror world, forgetting that there was a heavenly god who didn't even fear the heavens. When a heavenly god went berserk, it was impossible to predict. Dai and Lin. Heavenly god Long Kuei cackled like a maniac as the sword in his hand fell. Heavenly god technique, world creation sword, origin. The sword imbued with the paramount power of light fell upon Enlin. The power of the formation had already been completely expended, and the Dao integration stage super mighty figures had also been severely wounded. This attack would definitely be able to end Enlin's life. Heavenly god Long Kuei couldn't help but burst into laughter. Then a slender, jade-like finger appeared in front of him. Ding! A crisp collision sounded. It was as pleasant as a clear spring. Heavenly god Long Kuei's expression froze. He saw that his falling sword was blocked by a finger. Chapter 1700. A flawlessly beautiful woman in a green dress appeared before Heavenly god Long Kuei without any warning. She had a pair of emerald green eyes, an intricate nose, a delicate mouth, pointy ears, and a pair of semi-transparent golden wings on her back. Heavenly god Long Kuei knew who she was. She was the fairy beside Enlin. However, the fairy before him had shrunk to the size of a human, and her beauty was impeccable. Her aura was so profound that even he was unable to detect it. Heavenly god Long Kuei's most powerful attack had been blocked by a single finger from this fairy. Was this the power of a god of creation? No, even a god of creation wouldn't be able to block that attack so easily. The fairy was not fighting as an individual. Instead, she was fighting with the power of the entire divine mirror world. Heavenly god Long Kuei didn't know how powerful she was in her current state, but he could already see the word invincible above her head. Little Na. Enlin yelled with elation at the sight of the fairy. He had the protection of the goddess of creation in the divine mirror world. How dare Heavenly god Long Kuei attack him during the chaos? Tina's appearance instantly stunned everyone present. In particular, Heavenly god Long Kuei's world creation sword had been stopped by Tina with a single finger, and the atmosphere reached a climax as everyone knew just how terrifying the world creation sword was. Nice one, Lil Na. Su Xiaolan heaved a sigh of relief with lingering fear in her heart. However, Tina's current state was a little strange, and her expression didn't change in the slightest. No, to put it more accurately, she had remained expressionless ever since she had appeared, as if nothing in this world could move her. She was a true god who looked down on the common people and would not tolerate the slightest bit of encroachment. She was a high and mighty god. I told you that I wanted peace. Why did you attack? Tina asked in a cold voice. Heavenly god Long Kuei wanted to completely destroy the world creation sword, but he was completely immobilized by the power of resistance imbued within the sword. Not only that, but the power of light imbued within the sword was being compressed relentlessly before being snuffed out like a tiny flame. Bam! The sword shattered. The world creation sword had been shattered by a single finger from Tina. Heavenly god Long Kuei's body trembled as an expression of despair appeared on his face. Lost. He lost. This attack was a gamble. He was betting that he could kill Enlin and the others before the backlash from the divine mirror world arrived. Now, he had lost the gamble, and the divine mirror world had appeared before he could strike. Ignoring the will of the divine mirror world is trespassing. You have to bear the consequences of your actions. Die. Tina pointed a finger at Heavenly god Long Kuei. Heavenly god Long Kuei's expression was filled with remorse and indignation. But before he had a chance to do anything, his body was pulverized by a burst of paramount power. Bang! Heavenly God Long Kuei exploded on the spot. The most powerful being of the heavenly human tribe had fallen. Tina withdrew her hand expressionlessly before turning to Enlin with a warm smile on her face. Then, her body transformed into particles of light and returned to this world. An extremely terrifying crisis was resolved just like that. The heavenly gods didn't attack the divine mirror world, so Tina didn't dare to attack them. Otherwise, the backlash from the Tai Chu continent would destroy the divine mirror world. However, if the heavenly gods defied the will of the divine mirror world, then the divine mirror world had the right to retaliate against them. This was why the heavenly gods didn't wreak havoc in the divine mirror world. They were afraid of the backlash from the divine mirror world. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, Dongfang Zhuangshi, and the others were all ecstatic. They had slain another powerful enemy, and they had done so without suffering any casualties. This was a joyous occasion. The Celestial Arch, Dongfang Zhuangshi, and Heavenly Venerate Yu Qiong had all fought with the resolve to die, but who would have thought that Heavenly God Long Kuei would seek his own death compared to the god-slaying team? The Heavenly Illusion God and the Heavenly Soul God's expressions were deathly pale. Their biggest trump card was gone. How were they supposed to fight this battle? There was no way they could fight this battle. At this moment, the two pillars of light in the sky, which were bestowing blessings upon Enlin and Su Xiaolan, began to slowly recede. It was quite clear that the blessing ceremony had concluded. Oh, wait. Only the first stage of the blessing had concluded. A resounding boom erupted. Another pillar of light crashed down upon Su Xiaolan's body. This time, Enlin was reduced to a bystander. He knew what kind of blessing this was, and his heart was filled with indignation and regret. Damn it, why did I cultivate to become a false immortal? Tina won't be able to help me improve my cultivation base like this. That's right, this blessing was known as the inheritance of Tao. To put it in simpler terms, this was a blessing that would allow one to attain enlightenment and make a breakthrough. Back when the divine mirror world had been upgraded, Dabai, Xiaohong, and Little Gu had all progressed significantly in their cultivation bases. Now, all of the blessings had fallen upon Su Xiaolan. What did you think was going to happen? Gotcha! It was as if a certain shackle had been broken. Su Xiaolan's aura soared into the heavens. Rumble! The great Tao of heaven and earth began to rumble. She had been accumulating for several decades, and she had finally attained enlightenment and reached a higher level. Su Xiaolan stood up, and her jade robe danced in the wind as translucent dragon scales appeared on her skin. Exquisite dragon horns grew on her head, and a pair of white vermilion bird wings spread open on her back. At that moment, she was both a proud true dragon and a holy beast vermilion bird born from chaotic chaos. She unleashed her true dragon divine Tao and vermilion bird divine Tao without any reservation. Two of the most noble and rare bloodlines, two of the most terrifying divine Taos. At this moment, they perfectly fused together and soared to the peak of the 9 heavens. Enlin and the Celestial Arch saw an azure true dragon with no end in sight, and it could tear through the heavens with just the slightest movement. At the same time, they also saw a vermilion bird transcending beyond heaven and earth. Just an ethereal cry erupted from the distance, and it was enough to strike fear into everyone's hearts. A true dragon and a vermilion bird have appeared between heaven and earth at the same time. This is the manifestation of the divine Tao. Su Xiaolan has made a breakthrough. She has progressed to the Tao integration intermediate stage. The Celestial Arch exclaimed with excitement. All Tao integration stage, super mighty figures would manifest their divine Tao phenomena upon their successful breakthroughs. As for heavenly tribulations, after the Tao integration stage, the great Tao of heaven and earth had already acknowledged the other party's divine Tao. Of course, it was also the most difficult for Tao integration stage super mighty figures to progress in their cultivation bases. If he wanted to increase his cultivation level, the only thing he could do was to constantly improve his Tao. He had to walk further and deeper on his Tao. There were no shortcuts. Black Spirit Snake, White Spirit Snake, Dongfang Zhuangshi, and the others all stared at the azure figure with envy in their eyes. Every single step taken by Tao, integration stage, super mighty figures was extremely difficult, and some of them could remain at the same spot for tens of thousands of years or even hundreds of thousands of years. A freakish prodigy like Su Xiaolan, who had only progressed to the Tao integration stage a few decades ago, was extremely enviable. This was definitely a joyous occasion for Su Xiaolan. Of course, this was definitely a good thing for the God-slaying team as well. They were going to have a much easier time in this battle. Chapter 17:01. The manifestation of the Tao realm stunned everyone present. The Pantheon True Dragon and the Holy Beast Vermilion Bird were simply too extravagant. Everyone says that the Divine Phoenix Maiden possesses two complete Divine Taos and has successfully integrated her Tao integration stage. Only after seeing her in person do I realize that she's even more extraordinary than the legends say. The chaotic element Martial Lord sighed with emotion. Indeed, the Celestial the Arch nodded in agreement. Even normal super mighty figures would be extremely powerful if they were to take either of the Tao of the True Dragon or the Tao of the Vermilion Bird. To think that she's able to take two Taos at once, and she's doing it so flawlessly. The ancient Dragon Empress looked up into the sky, and she couldn't help but sigh with emotion. What an enviable aptitude and opportunity. Little Huang was also flapping its wings excitedly as it chirped in excitement. It was clearly very proud of Su Xiaolan's breakthrough, as if to say, "Do you see this? This is the person who beats me up every day. Isn't she bad *SS? As for Enlin, he was the happiest person aside from Su Xiaolan. He was almost shouting to the world, "Do you see this? This is my Tao partner. Isn't she bad *SS? Su Xiaolan's breakthrough was successful, and the manifestation of the Tao realm only dissipated after a short while. Her aura had already become significantly more powerful, and her entire body was exuding an extremely astonishing aura. As for just how bad *SS she was now, that would have to be tested to find out. The light of blessing in the sky was still shining brightly. She took advantage of this opportunity to consolidate her Tao integration intermediate stage cultivation base and become a true Tao integration intermediate stage super mighty figure. "Thank you, little Na." Su Xiaolan looked up into the sky with a smile. She then turned to Enlin with a warm smile in her eyes. "Enlin, I made a successful breakthrough. Congratulations." Enlin gave her an excited hug. A warm and fragrant body instantly enveloped his entire body. Perhaps it was because Su Xiaolan had only just made her breakthrough, but her body was still a little warm. Enlin felt like he was holding a large heater in his arms. Most importantly, her body was still very soft and very comfortable to the touch. "Oh!" White Spirit Snake's mouth gaped open as she stared blankly at the passionate embrace between Enlin and Su Xiaolan. A disdainful expression appeared on Black Spirit Snake's face. "Oh, we still have enemies to deal with." Su Xiaolan blushed and said softly. Enlin longed for the warmth for a moment before letting go. He nodded seriously. "All right, let's get down to business. We'll talk about it after our celebration." There are other ways to celebrate?" Su Xiaolan blinked. Enlin raised his eyebrows as a meaningful light flashed in his eyes. "Xiaolan, after this battle, I can let you do whatever you want of me, Su Xiaolan. Wasn't there something wrong with this kind of celebration?" The multicolored light in the sky began to disappear. The desire for peace and not war that had been birthed in the hearts of the countless gods also disappeared at this moment. It was quite clear that the grand moment of the world's upgrade had passed. The divine mirror world was still as mighty as ever, but it no longer interfered with the choices of all living beings. This meant that they could fight now. The heavenly illusion god and the heavenly soul god were also aware of this, and they became even more panicked. Were they going to be beaten up again? What were they supposed to do? They discovered that there were already several pairs of eyes glaring at them with menacing intent, as if they were going to eat them. Damn it. What do we do? The heavenly soul god's body was trembling, not from fear, but from the fact that it had been pummeled so many times by the ancient dragon empress that its soul was a little unstable. No, this isn't a dire situation. We have a chance to turn the tables. The heavenly illusion god suddenly said, "This world has been upgraded, but the restrictions on our powers of the heavenly gods have been loosened. How much of our power can you unleash?" The divine halo above the heavenly soul god's head glowed with an excited light. 90%. I can unleash 90% of my power. That's great. An elated expression appeared on the heavenly illusion god's face as hope surged in its heart. The weaker a world was, the more powerful its self-protection mechanisms would be. Otherwise, if a heavenly god was able to destroy a world with a single attack, there would be no way for a world to develop. Now that the divine mirror world had been upgraded to a higher level, its foundation had become extremely firm, so the restrictions on the powers of the heavenly gods had naturally weakened significantly. If we were fighting on the Taichu continent, we wouldn't be in this situation. A cold light flashed through the heavenly illusion god's eyes. Now is the time for revenge. Let's show them the true power of heavenly gods. The heavenly soul god was very enraged, and a gray soul power surged from its body as a terrifying aura proliferated forth. Right at this moment, a black figure flew over. A long and slender leg appeared before its eyes, and the tip of its foot glowed with an extremely dazzling golden light, as if it were going to crush the heavens with a single stomp. Foot of the heavenly Tao. Boom! The heavenly soul god let loose a wail of anguish as it was kicked into the ground. Crack! Another crack appeared on its divine halo. I'm going to kill you. The heavenly soul god had just been in high spirits, but had only said a few lines before it was kicked into the ground. This was an utter humiliation to it. The heavenly soul god crawled up from the ground and spread its hands open. A gray domain rapidly expanded with it at the center, and everything it came into contact with became a vast expanse of murky gray, as if they were two completely different worlds. This was the heavenly soul god's signature technique, Soul Realm. This was a space that it ruled over. As long as it could drag the ancient dragon empress into its domain again, it was confident in its ability to kill her with its soul power. Heaven-crushing armor. The ancient dragon empress finally didn't dare to charge into the soul realm recklessly like she did last time. Instead, she chose to resist. The heavenly soul god's battle intent surged even more upon seeing this, and an even more dazzling light erupted from its gray divine halo. As its soul realm expanded, its soul power was so rich that heaven and earth tremored violently, as if it were going to engulf the entire heaven and earth. Ha ha ha, you want to style my power? Dream on. I'm no longer the same as I was in the past. The boundless soul realm transformed everything it came into contact with into a gray color. The ancient dragon empress, shimmering golden heaven-crushing armor, crashed into the soul power enchantment barrier, and it was instantly showing signs of cracking. Thankfully, it was still able to maintain its color, indicating that she hadn't completely fallen into the soul realm. The heavenly soul god immediately pounced toward the ancient dragon empress as fast as a wisp of smoke upon seeing this. A pair of murky gray scimitars appeared in its hands, and it was like a ruthless and mysterious death god. It was also at this moment that a ball of white holy flames suddenly fell from the sky, violently tearing apart its soul realm with a heaven-crushing true intent. A figure in a jade robe flashed through the air like lightning before appearing beside the heavenly soul god at an extremely terrifying speed. The dragon sparrow sword in her hand shimmered with a dazzling light, as if there were a true dragon and a vermilion bird revolving around it. Dragon sparrow heaven-crushing slash. The cry was as pleasant as the cry of a sparrow. However, the killing intent imbued within it sent chills running down one's spine. Boom! The extremely terrifying sword light slashed down with a loud rumble. The heavenly soul god was caught off guard and was sliced in half. Chapter 1702. The heavenly soul god knew that it was celebrating too early. It had indeed recovered 90% of its power, but it had forgotten that the ancient dragon empress was no longer fighting on her own. She had a bunch of teammates with her. Su Xiaolan was now a Dao integration intermediate stage super mighty figure, and she had fully recovered from her injuries. As such, the heavenly soul god was sliced in half even though it was caught off guard. The heavenly soul god let loose a wail of anguish, and its halves quickly twisted before transforming into gray soul mist that disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, Su Xiaolan turned toward a certain direction. A gray mist suddenly materialized there, which transformed into a completely unscathed heavenly soul god. The soul realm was the heavenly soul god's home field, and it was virtually immortal within the soul realm. It was exactly because of this that the ancient dragon empress was still unable to kill it even after beating it up for so long. She could only unleash heaven-crushing techniques over and over again in an attempt to wear it down to death. Phew! Divine Phoenix Maiden, you're courting death. An enraged expression appeared on the heavenly soul god's face as a portion of the power of its soul realm crashed down upon Su Xiaolan's body. A clear crack instantly appeared on Su Xiaolan's true dragon wall. However, she was not fearful in the slightest. Instead, she charged directly toward the heavenly soul god as her dragon sparrow sword once again erupted with the power of her dual divine Tao, as well as her extremely powerful heaven-crushing true intent. Dragon Sparrow Heaven-Crushing Strike. The dragon sparrow's sword instantly fell at an extremely fast speed. However, the heavenly soul god was already mentally prepared, and it was not going to be struck so easily. Its body instantly twisted into an extremely peculiar Z-shape to evade Su Xiaolan's sword strike. All of a sudden, the soul realm was torn apart once again. A fist that was as dazzling as the golden sun fell from the sky. The heaven-crushing true intent was profound, vast, and domineering to the point that it seemed as if it could shatter the 9 heavens. The heavenly soul god's body shuddered. This was another heavenly disciple-level opponent. Fist of the heavenly Tao. Enlin wore a white robe, and his fist crashed down like the sun, shattering the entire space around it. He had already found the perfect opportunity to strike, and the heavenly soul god had no time to evade. In its haste, the heavenly soul god only had time to materialize layers of black soul power armor over its body. These layers of armor were able to absorb the paramount soul power and engulf all attacks. It was a pity that Enlin's fist of the heavenly Tao could break through the supreme power of the heavens. The golden fist exploded upon the heavenly soul god's body, and its black armor was soon pulverized before the heavenly soul god was smashed into the ground, causing the soul realm to tremor violently. At this moment, a tall and slender woman in a colorful imperial robe flew through the air, and her hands transformed into peerlessly sharp dragon claws before crashing down upon the heavenly soul god. Palm of the heavenly Tao. Rumble. The ground was crushed. The heavenly soul god wailed with anguish. The entire soul world trembled violently, as if it was difficult to maintain. The combined attacks of Enlin, Su Xiaolan, and the ancient dragon empress had left it completely disoriented. It thought that after recovering some of its strength, it would be able to reverse the situation. Now, it tragically discovered that it seemed to have been beaten even more miserably. The earth had caved in to form the shape of a gargantuan palm. At the center of the gargantuan palm, the heavenly soul god's body trembled violently. It crumbled and materialized again, materialized and crumbled again, and it appeared to be in an extremely unstable state. Its long gray robe had already dissipated into smoke, revealing its thin, semi-transparent body. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, and the ancient dragon empress were not going to wait for the heavenly soul god to catch its breath, and they immediately unleashed their most powerful attacks. Hence, they didn't even pause before pouncing toward the heavenly soul god. Soul ignition body. The heavenly soul god let loose an enraged roar, and its body suddenly swelled to over 10,000 feet in size. Countless green, ghostly flames revolved around its body like venomous snakes. At the same time, its aura also soared explosively, and it opened its cavernous mouth to expel countless extremely powerful battle souls armed with weapons. All of them were soul bodies, and they pounced toward Enlin and the others at an extremely fast speed. The weapons in their hands unleashed peculiar energy fluctuations, and even Tao integration stage super mighty figures would perish upon being struck by their attacks. Enlin closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his eyes had become pure golden in color. At the same time, a paramount aura erupted violently from his body. He had attacks that targeted one's consciousness. However, he didn't want to use them. Instead, he was going to use the Great Divine Might technique. Golden ripples proliferated through the air. All of the battle souls abruptly faltered in midair. All of them were struck by a sense of awe-inspiring might, as if a paramount god had descended upon this world, and the only thing they could do was kneel at its feet. Thus, Enlin, Su Xiaolan, and the ancient dragon empress passed through the interception of the battle souls with ease before pouncing toward the heavenly soul god again. Blue lightning erupted from Su Xiaolan's sword as she slashed toward the heavenly soul god relentlessly. Each and every one of her sword strikes was extremely fast, as if she had invested all of her skill points in her sword speed. The heavenly soul god wielded its gray sabers and clashed with Su Xiaolan over 100 times in a single second. Enlin was just about to unleash his finger of the heavenly Tao when a silver sword suddenly shot forth from the heavenly soul god's abdomen. It was also at this moment that the soul realm instantly froze, and everything within it was forced to a standstill. Enlin maintained his crushing heavenly true intent to protect himself, but his speed still instantly plummeted. The only thing that maintained its original speed was the silver sword blade imbued with earth-shattering killing intent. Enlin, die! The heavenly soul god knew that Enlin was going to take advantage of this opportunity to attack it, so it had prepared a killing technique for him. Now that Enlin was completely defenseless, this was the perfect opportunity for it to retaliate. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face, and a green light suddenly erupted from his body before proliferating outward. Come on out, Xian Wu Heaven Sealing Shell. A green turtle shell appeared on Enlin's body, exuding an extremely powerful aura that was thick, sturdy, and indestructible. At the same time, his evading turtle technique and heaven-crushing true intent were activated. The Xian Wu Heaven Sealing Shell's defensive prowess was elevated explosively once again. The heavenly soul god's killing technique also descended at this moment, and its sharp silver sword blade pierced into the green turtle shell, upon which an extremely sharp, screeching sound erupted. The heavenly soul god was dumbstruck. How could this be? How could it not be pierced? Just as everyone was still reeling from shock, Enlin had already arrived before the heavenly soul god and pointed a finger toward its head, upon which a golden light pierced through the entire soul realm. Finger of the heavenly Tao. Boom! The golden finger tore through the heavenly soul god's head with an unstoppable force. Not only that, but the golden finger tore the murky gray soul realm in half with unstoppable force. Su Xiaolan also took advantage of this opportunity to unleash over 1,000 sword strikes upon the heavenly soul god, each and every one of which made the heavenly soul god soul body tremble violently. The ancient dragon empress hand exuded a peculiar energy fluctuation as she pressed her dragon claws onto the headless heavenly soul god's chest. Heaven-crushing technique, palm heaven. The ancient dragon empress dragon claws seemed to have caught on to something before crushing it viciously. Crack boom! The heavenly soul god's entire body exploded. The murky, gray soul power of the entire soul realm surged like a tsunami, as if it were roaring with rage and resisting. It was very insane, but after the frenzy, it was cold and feeble before receding like the receding tide. Enlin saw the soul realm shatter, and the warm sunlight shone down upon heaven and earth as color returned to heaven and earth. He also saw the heavenly soul God's body dissipate like smoke, and he saw its already shattered gray divine halo shatter into dust before disappearing into the world as specks of light. He still hadn't come to his senses, but he knew one thing. The heavenly soul God had completely fallen. Chapter 17:03. Oi, dummy, what are you standing there for? A sweet-sounding and gentle voice rang in his ears. Su Xiaolan patted Enlin's shoulder with an amused expression. Enlin immediately came to his senses. The heavenly soul God died, just like that. I feel like we won too easily. The ancient dragon empress rolled her eyes upon hearing this. Easily? That's because you didn't see how tired I was when I fought the heavenly soul God for 10,000 rounds. 10,000 rounds? That's you beating it up for 10,000 rounds, right? And Lin chuckled. The ancient dragon empress was speechless. That seemed to be the case. The heavenly soul God was about to rise again, only to be beaten to death by the ancient dragon empress, and Lin, and Su Xiaolan. Thinking about it, it was quite a pitiful sight. Su Xiaolan laid a hand on Enlin's chest with a pained expression, only to be greeted by the sight of a thick, green turtle shell. Enlin, you didn't lose to the heavenly soul God, and you won, so you don't feel safe, right? Of course not. Enlin immediately denied this. He then analyzed the situation in his mind. That really did seem to be the case. Crap, did I awaken some kind of powerful ability? The fall of the heavenly soul God plunged the final heavenly illusion God into despair. The heavenly God's plan to kill Enlin had entered its final phase. The celestial arch, Dongfang Zhuangshi, and the chaotic element martial lord had joined the fray, and the heavenly illusion God let loose cries of anguish. Never would the heavenly illusion God have thought that it would be surrounded and killed by a bunch of people when it came up with the plan to kill Enlin. This was a strange, illusionary space that was filled with the most lethal temptations in this world, as well as the most terrifying wind, fire, lightning, and the most powerful life forms. The heavenly illusion God was the ruler of this realm, and after recovering its power, this realm had become even more powerful. However, the heavenly illusion God was still unable to kill the battling Buddha. The victorious fighting Buddha was like a god of war that would never fall. His golden glassy eyes could see through the layers of fog, and the Jingu bang in his hand could shatter all evil spirits and nightmares. The more he fought in the dream realm, the more valiant he became. It didn't care how bad *SS the heavenly illusion God's illusionary domain was, or how bad *SS the living beings it summoned were. In any case, they weren't as bad *SS as it was. The strongest dreamscape, primal chaos nightmare, come out. The heavenly illusion God was forced into a corner by everyone. It began to unleash its power without any regard for the consequences it had to pay. The crisp sound of something cracking erupted from its divine halo. At the same time, an extremely terrifying aura began to erupt. Hoo. It was as if the wind of the abyss had blown past, and everything had become ice-cold and frozen. A dark and sinister shadow suddenly appeared in the dream realm. It was shapeless and formless. In an instant, it had countless sharp claws and huge mouths that wanted to devour people. In an instant, it was as round as a black hole, releasing a terrifying and destructive aura. This was the most powerful life form that the heavenly illusion God had created out of thin air. ZZZ. A peculiar yet infinitely bewitching sound erupted. Dongfang Zhuangshi felt as if his head had been torn apart over 10,000 times in an instant, and his entire body shuddered. The primal chaos nightmare before him seemed to be a being that was several levels above him, and his body began to tremble in instinctive fear. Right at this moment, a sinister smile appeared on the primal chaos nightmare's face. Dongfang Zhuangshi's body was sliced in half, and blood splattered all over the illusionary domain. The battling Buddha's eyes widened, and golden holy flames erupted from his eyes as he tried to incinerate the terrifying ball of darkness before him. However, The primal chaos nightmare's body began to swell explosively within the golden flames, as if the more flames burned, the more badass it became. It was still smiling, and it slashed its black claws through the air, upon which the battling Buddha's iridescent armor was instantly sliced open. Blood imbued with Buddhist power gushed forth. The battling Buddha was astonished, and he hurtled back in retreat. One had to realize that he possessed an indestructible diamond body. Even if he were to stand on the spot and allow the divine tool to strike him relentlessly, it wouldn't be able to inflict any damage. The heavenly illusion god had pummeled him for so long, but it had only inflicted some superficial wounds. Now, his defenses had been completely broken by a single slash from the primal chaos nightmare. Not only him, but even the celestial the arch and the chaotic element martial lord were also completely repressed. The primal chaos nightmare was facing 4 enemies at once, and it had the absolute upper hand. Ha ha! Die, all of you! The only fate that awaits all of you is death. The heavenly illusion god seemed to have gone insane, and the divine halo above its head became more and more dazzling. The 2 halves of Dongfang Zhuangshi crashed to the ground. His body was enshrouded by demonic blood, and he was completely healed. However, his body had shrunk significantly to the size of a demonic blood Kirin that was only 100 feet in size. The little demonic blood Kirin fled frantically from the illusionary domain with an expression of shock and horror on its face. This was his last life. If he was killed one more time, he might really die and his Tao would vanish. Even though he was prepared to die, he didn't want to die. Dongfang Mengjie hadn't been saved yet, so he didn't want to die. However, the primal chaos nightmare was not going to let this opportunity slip by, and it extended its demonic claws with a sinister smile on its face. Right at this moment, the celestial arch, the battling Buddha, and the chaotic element martial lord all unleashed attacks at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. Another intense battle ensued before the 3 of them were forced into retreat by the primal chaos nightmare. Holy sh**t. How did the heavenly illusion god become so powerful? The celestial arch was astonished. The golden divine monkey, over 10,000 feet tall, threw up a mouthful of blood as it forcibly stabilized its injuries. Its power hasn't actually increased by much, but this illusionary life form is indeed very difficult to deal with. The heavenly illusion god must have paid an extremely heavy price to unleash this attack. Otherwise, it wouldn't have waited until now to use it. If the price is going insane, then it's going insane now, the chaotic element martial lord said in a cold voice. The heavenly illusion god was still smiling, as if it had gone insane, as if it had already cast aside its own life and death, and was going to take everyone down with it. The heavenly illusion god is the core. We have to find an opportunity to kill it, and the primal chaos nightmare will disappear. The celestial arch turned toward the heavenly illusion god. I'll go hold off that be asterisk starred, and you guys take this opportunity to kill the heavenly illusion god. The battling Buddha left the most powerful enemy for himself. However, just as the 3 of them were discussing how they were going to fight, a peculiar smile suddenly appeared on the primal chaos nightmare monster's face as it extended a black tentacle and grabbed onto the heavenly illusion god. What are you doing? Let go of me. Let go of me. The heavenly illusion god's expression shifted as it began to struggle. However, the heavenly illusion god's power was not something that the primal chaos nightmare monster could compare with. A series of black tentacles sealed off all of the heavenly illusion god's movements. A peculiar smile then appeared on the primal chaos nightmare monster's face before it opened its cavernous mouth and swallowed the heavenly illusion god. Gulp! After swallowing it, it chewed carefully. The heavenly illusion god's blood-curdling cries were still reverberating throughout this bizarre world. The celestial arch, the battling Buddha, and the chaotic element martial lord were all dumbstruck. All right, there was no need to kill the heavenly illusion god. It was eaten by the primal chaos nightmare monster. What happened to the key to breaking out of this predicament? What happened to the primal chaos nightmare monster's death after killing the heavenly illusion god? The primal chaos nightmare monster was telling them, with its actions, that this was not going to work. Chapter 1704. Heavenly gods possessed the paramount power of the heavenly Tao and were a part of the heavens. They were paramount beings, and no living beings dared to invade them, let alone eat them. However, the chaotic nightmare monster had done it. Furthermore, it had done it without any psychological burden. Theoretically speaking, no one had the right to eat a heavenly god's power. However, the chaotic nightmare monster was created by the heavenly illusion god using the power of a heavenly god, so it was an illusory creation that transcended reality. It was something that the heavenly illusion god had created with all of its imagination, so its existence couldn't be determined by common sense. In other words, this thing created by the heavenly gods had already exceeded the limits of what the heavenly illusion god could handle. Since it had exceeded its limits, it would naturally suffer a backlash. The chaotic nightmare monster swallowing the heavenly illusion god was most likely the result of this backlash. A lunatic created a devil, but the devil swallowed the lunatic. This was very reasonable. However, the people who were battling the devil were suffering. The celestial arch, the battling Buddha, and the chaotic element martial lord's flesh had already crawled. They discovered that the chaotic nightmare monster's aura had swallowed the heavenly illusion god once again. Did it convert the heavenly illusion god's power into its own? How did it do that? I don't understand. This is a life form that exists outside of the laws of nature. Things seemed to be getting more and more serious. They had thought that the heavenly illusion god would perish, but never would they have thought that something like this would happen. The heavenly illusion god seemed to have fallen, but an extremely powerful being had appeared in its place. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, and the ancient dragon empress also tore through the illusionary domain and arrived on the battlefield. They had also witnessed the chaotic nightmare monster swallowing the heavenly illusion god, and their expressions were extremely grave. Crack! The illusionary domain shattered like glass, revealing the reality of the outside world. This was the result of the heavenly illusion god's power disappearing. Before everyone had a chance to rejoice, a new domain enshrouded them. This was a domain filled with insanity and terror. Within the darkness, it was as if there were countless devils trying to devour all intruders and consign them to eternal damnation. A relentless stream of demonic music struck directly into the depths of one's soul, striking fear into the hearts of all living beings. At this moment, Enlin even saw the scene of Su Xiaolan being brutally murdered over 100 times. It was incomparably real, and it was deeply imprinted in his mind, almost driving him crazy. Without any hesitation, everyone unleashed their heaven-crushing true intent at the same time, and only then did that feeling of horror diminish slightly. However, they were still unable to completely eradicate it. Regardless of whether it was Enlin or the Celestial Arch, both of them felt as if a demon had already taken root in their hearts and was just waiting to sprout before devouring them. Instinctive fear. A black shadow appeared in the domain. It had no fixed shape, but Enlin knew it was it. A twisted black divine ring appeared above its head, making it look strange and terrifying. At the same time, a supreme aura spread out, as if it was the supreme ruler of this world. It was the heavens. Enlin didn't feel good. What the hell was this? The chaotic nightmare monster ate the heavenly illusion god and became a heavenly god? At this moment, outside the domain, within the Karma Star Protection Formation, the demonic Blood Kirin and Little Huang were trembling uncontrollably as they hugged each other for warmth. Black Spirit Snake was exasperated. Look at you. You're the first deserter of the god-slaying team. The demonic Blood Kirin retorted, if I don't run, I'll be the first member of the god-slaying team to die. Black Spirit Snake's lips twitched, and she had no response. Senior Enlin is going to be fine, right? Should we go and help him? White Spirit Snake looked at the massive black barrier in the distance with a concerned expression. She couldn't see what was going on inside. Don't go if you're severely injured. The enemy is extremely powerful. If you go in your current state, you'll only be a burden to Enlin. Dongfang Zhuangshi spoke in a straightforward manner. He wanted to strengthen his spectating team. Little Yellow Phoenix chimed in from the side. At this moment within the Black Domain, the chaotic nightmare monster had unleashed its even more terrifying power. Its soft song was able to awe one's soul. With a casual swipe of its hand, it was able to crack Enlin's turtle shell. It was also able to engulf most of the attacks it took. This was a true chaotic nightmare monster, one that was born from chaos and feared no one. The chaotic nightmare monster still held the upper hand, and as time passed, it became more and more powerful. It was like a bottomless pit that was trying to drag Enlin and the others into the abyss step by step. What an ominous being! It's even more terrifying than the heavenly gods. If we ignore it, it could very well incur even greater consequences. We can't hesitate any longer. Let's attack together. We have to end this battle as soon as possible. Enlin, the ancient dragon empress, Su Xiaolan, the celestial arch, the chaotic element martial lord, and the battling Buddha knew that this battle was not going to be easy, so they all unleashed their most powerful attacks. Su Xiaolan unleashed her dual divine Dao buff technique to elevate her power to the Dao integration pinnacle stage again. The celestial arch unleashed his strange jade pestle and unleashed his final attack. The chaotic element martial lord's power of chaos reached its pinnacle, and each and every one of his fists was capable of shattering mountains and splitting seas. The battling Buddha's golden-banded staff became massive, long, and thick, like a gargantuan pillar that pierced through the heavens. It then crashed relentlessly into the chaotic nightmare monster, trying to completely pulverize it. Enlin and the ancient dragon empress unleashed their most powerful heaven-crushing techniques toward their enemies. The six top-rate, super mighty figures unleashed their most powerful spell techniques, and their combined power was extremely terrifying. Even heavenly goddess Wu Ming's world creation sword was probably no match for it. This was truly an apocalyptic attack. The chaotic nightmare monster's inky black body was extremely terrifying, unfathomable, and extremely difficult to deal with, but it was still shattered by the relentless attacks. Boom, boom, boom. Within the Black Domain, earth-shattering energy exploded, as if it were trying to pulverize everything. The chaotic nightmare monster was a little dazed by the power unleashed by Enlin and the others, and its body was reduced to shreds. The twisted divine halo above its head had also dimmed significantly as a result. It was also at this moment that the ancient dragon empress appeared before the chaotic nightmare monster, and her hand transformed into a dragon claw. An extremely peculiar burst of universal power imbued within her palm abruptly plunged into its body. Heaven-crushing technique, palm heaven. The ancient dragon empress let loose a clear cry as heaven-crushing true intent erupted forth, as if she were going to grasp the entire heavens in her palm. She had used this technique to crush the heavenly soul god to death, and she was going to use the same technique to crush this chaotic nightmare monster to death. However, she immediately regretted her decision after unleashing this technique. She discovered that her palm heaven was completely unable to capture the chaotic nightmare monster's life channel. The chaotic nightmare monster structure was simply far too peculiar, and it had exceeded the scope of her spell technique's comprehension. How could this be? A dazed expression appeared on the ancient dragon empress' face. At this moment, countless black swords had already emerged from the chaotic nightmare monster's tattered body, piercing through space before instantly puncturing the ancient dragon empress. Chapter 17:05. Each and every one of the paramount heaven-crushing techniques was imbued with boundless power, and they were all lethal weapons that targeted the Tao of the heavens. However, the ancient dragon empress had encountered the most incomprehensible situation. The palm heaven didn't work. Not only could the palm heaven extinguish the lives of heavenly gods, but it could also annihilate them as well. Countless black swords pierced through her body. Not only did they destroy her meridians and bones, but that strange power even tore her divine soul apart. Ancient Dragon Empress. Su Xiaolan arrived just in time to slice through the black swords before carrying the severely wounded Ancient Dragon Empress and fleeing into the distance using her lightning transformation movement technique. The Celestial Arch, the chaotic element Martial Lord, and the battling Buddha continued to attack in a frenzy. Even though the chaotic nightmare monster's body had been shattered, its aura was gradually recovering. The situation was extremely dire. Everyone had just unleashed their most powerful spell techniques, and they were all extremely feeble now. They most likely wouldn't be able to unleash that combination attack a second time. In contrast, the chaotic nightmare monster still hadn't been mortally wounded, and its injuries were also quickly recovering. This meant that if things continued like this, they would most likely all be wiped out. And Lin fell into a state of panic as he tried to think of a way out of this predicament. He didn't have much energy left, and the Palm Heaven didn't work anymore. What else could he use to inflict lethal damage on the chaotic nightmare monster? And Lin's eyes suddenly lit up, and a series of Dao patterns appeared beneath his feet. He wanted to see what the chaotic nightmare monster's Dao was. If he could slash it, he would be able to insta-kill it with a single Dao sword strike. However, in the next instant, Lin was completely dumbstruck. The chaotic nightmare monster didn't have a Dao. That's right, this was a life form created by the heavenly illusion god. It was a fake thing, so how could it possibly have a Dao? The heavenly illusion god's Dao was the paramount great Dao, but had been twisted beyond recognition by the chaotic nightmare monster. It couldn't even be considered a Dao anymore, and no one knew what it was. Even though the chaotic nightmare monster's divine halo exuded the energy fluctuations of a heavenly god, no one knew what it was. It was extremely peculiar and inexplicable. It doesn't even have a Dao, and it destroyed the heavenly illusion god's Dao. There are actually living beings in this world that can do such a thing? And Lin was shocked. He gave up on the idea of using his Dao sword to kill his opponent. If he did that, he would most likely suffer the same fate as the Ancient Dragon Empress. Not only would he exhaust all of his energy, but he would also be killed. What to do? What other methods could he use to deal a fatal blow to his opponent? Lin carefully searched his mind for a way to deal with it. There was no Dao, but there was energy, and energy was the foundation that allowed it to move. It was essentially a heavenly god technique, but now it had become the ruler of the heavenly gods. But no matter what, it was just a technique, and Lin's eyes gradually lit up with vigor. Staff of the Heavenly Dao. The dignified voice of a monkey rang out. The golden-banded staff was long, thick, and enormous like a pillar that could hold up the heavens and the earth. It erupted with boundless golden divine radiance as it descended from the sky and smashed directly onto the primal chaos nightmare monster. Rumble. The golden heaven-crushing energy caused the surrounding dark and viscous space to tremble violently. The battling Buddha's pupils contracted slightly. He discovered that the very bottom of his golden-banded staff was being held up by countless black tentacles, thereby preventing it from striking the primal chaos nightmare monster's body. You were able to completely block even my paramount heaven-crushing techniques. The battling Buddha was in disbelief. If he were to use this technique against the heavenly illusion god would definitely be crushed. However, it had been blocked by the primal chaos nightmare monster with its bare hands. The Celestial Arch, the chaotic element Martial Lord, and Su Xiaolan quickly closed in on the primal chaos nightmare monster. Heavenly Chains. The Celestial Arch waved a hand through the air, upon which countless chains imbued with heavenly symbols bound the primal chaos nightmare monster's body. Mountain Dragon Fists. The chaotic element Martial Lord's fist crashed down upon the chaotic nightmare monster's body, and an enormous power crashed down from the sky, as if it were gravity itself. Su Xiaolan waved a hand through the air, and countless bolts of lightning pierced through the air before paralyzing the primal chaos nightmare monster's body. The trio's attacks were not meant to kill the enemy, but to bind the enemy with their most powerful spells. Their goal was to make the chaos nightmare monster lose the ability to resist and counterattack in an instant. They wanted to create the perfect environment for one person to attack. Lin flashed toward the primal chaos nightmare monster, and a golden veined pattern appeared on his forehead, upon which a golden ripple proliferated through the air. Divine Plunder Technique. This was Lin's special spell technique, which could plunder an enemy's power or technique. Back when Lin was in the heavenly void beast's stomach, he had used this method to plunder the body of chaotic essence into his sea of vital energy. The body of chaotic essence was actually a very peculiar life form. It was a spell technique, but it was also a source of energy, and it had its own thoughts and consciousness. This was very similar to the primal chaos nightmare monster. Lin was able to use the divine plunder technique to subdue the body of chaotic essence of the heavenly void beast. So would he be able to use the same technique to plunder the most terrifying life form that the heavenly gods had created? He was willing to take this risk. The golden vein pattern on his forehead surged. A power that seemed to be able to plunder everything in this world enshrouded the primal chaos nightmare monster. The primal chaos nightmare monster's twisted and twisted body shuddered violently, and an expression of horror appeared on its face for the first time. The darkness around its body quickly surged as it tried to retreat in a frenzy. The battling Buddha was not going to let it get away. A scintillating golden light erupted from his golden-banded staff, and its weight increased abruptly, causing the ground below to cave in for several dozen meters. The Celestial Arch, the chaotic element martial lord, and Su Xiaolan's binding spell techniques became even more powerful. The primal chaos nightmare monster's body was completely unable to escape from Lin's spell techniques. It was also at this moment that an indescribable suction force suddenly erupted from the golden eye pattern on Lin's forehead, which continued to strip away its power. The primal chaos nightmare monster was given a huge fright upon seeing this. It had not panicked in the slightest, even when being surrounded by 6 top-rate powerful beings, but now it was struggling with all its might. However, all of this was to no avail. Its dark and irregular body was being compressed by a certain power, and it quickly shrank before being sucked into Lin's golden eye. Bam! The peculiar domain of darkness was instantly shattered. Sunlight shone down upon heaven and earth again. On the ground, there was a figure that seemed both real and fake. It was like a dream, but it was on the verge of death. It was lying motionlessly on the ground, and the blurry divine ring above its head was covered in cracks. What's going on? The heavenly illusion god murmured. It was then greeted by the sight of a familiar figure appearing before it. You've lost, and Lin spoke in an indifferent voice. The heavenly illusion god. I used my most powerful technique, but it still couldn't kill you? And Lin rested his evil-slaying sword against the heavenly illusion god's neck and looked down from above. All those who offend the human race must be slain, no matter who they are. It's time for you to die, heavenly illusion god. The evil-slaying sword mercilessly sliced open the heavenly illusion god's neck. A powerful heaven-crushing power instantly pulverized the other party's body. The heavenly illusion god had fallen. Chapter 1706. The heavenly soul god and the heavenly illusion god had both fallen. 2 undetectable powers rose into the sky and attempted to return to the Tai Chu continent, only to be intercepted by the divine mirror world. Just like the heavenly reality god, they were ravaged by the divine mirror world and analyzed by all types of energy. It was as if the divine mirror world was trying to see through them. In the end, they would be placed in the sky and carefully beaten. When they were no longer of any value, they would be thrown out like garbage. That's right. It was that inhumane. It was that realistic. Of course, Lin and the others didn't know about all of this. However, Tina was able to see everything clearly. Not only that, but as a heavenly god, her understanding of the representatives of the heavenly Tao had also deepened. On the battlefield, all 5 heavenly gods had perished, and all the enemies had been killed. This huge battle result caused the members of the God Massacre team to cheer happily, feeling extremely carefree. Lin and Su Xiaolan hugged each other with tears in their eyes. They had risked their lives together, and they had all survived. It was truly a miracle. Heavenly Goddess Wu Ming, Heavenly God Long Kei, the Heavenly Illusion God, the Heavenly Reality God, and the Heavenly Soul God. We've executed 5 heavenly gods at once. This feels great. The battling Buddha chortled with glee. This battle really wasn't easy to win. There were many times when I thought I was going to die. Dongfang Zhuangshi sighed with emotion. It's a pity that Patriarch Shuntung and the Dark Thunder Emperor have fallen. White Spirit Snake heaved a forlorn sigh. This was a satisfying battle. I still have a lot of room for improvement. The primordial chaos martial saint's muscles trembled as the white primordial chaos force gathered around his body, as if it contained a will that could pierce the heavens. The celestial arch clasped his hands behind his back and looked up into the sky. This is a victory for the kingdom of the 9 states, a victory for the human race, and a victory for the entire Taichu continent. Do you see this, living beings of the Taichu continent? He was speaking to the living beings watching the live stream outside of the Taichu continent. Actually, they didn't see it. A pleasant voice sounded from the sky. Everyone faltered upon hearing this. Ahem, I have to focus on upgrading my divine mirror world and can't afford to be distracted, so I cut off the live stream. Tina's voice sounded again. Everyone came to a sudden realization, but they still felt some regret in their hearts. It wasn't easy for them to have the chance to show off in front of the billions of living beings in the world, but the screen turned black. The sense of accomplishment was greatly reduced, and the strength of the morale was also greatly weakened. The reason why the God Massacre team live-streamed the execution of the heavenly gods was to boost their own morale and diminish their enemies' prestige. As if she knew what Lin and the others were thinking, Tina's voice sounded from above again. However, there's no need for you to feel too sorry for yourselves. I've already recorded all of the scenes of you slaying the heavenly god. I've also captured many of your dashing photos, and you can send them to Big Sister by in high definition. Although he couldn't record the video in real time, he could still take a few photos secretly. Everyone's faces lit up when they heard this, and they all requested to see the photos to see how handsome they looked. One image after another appeared in the sky. And Lin Su Xiaolan, the Celestial Arch, White Spirit Snake, Black Spirit Snake, Dongfang Zhuangshi, Little Huang, Emperor Zui, the Battling Buddha. The images were extremely clear, and their movements were cool and dashing. Furthermore, they were all clips of them beating up the heavenly gods. The ancient dragon empress killed the heavenly soul god, Tina killed heavenly god Long Kue, and Lin killed the heavenly reality god, heavenly goddess Wu Ming, and the heavenly illusion god were all extremely shocking. Everyone was mesmerized by this. White Spirit Snake turned toward the man beside her with stars of admiration in her eyes. Senior Lin is the most handsome. You killed 3 heavenly gods with your own 2 hands. Everyone finally came to their senses at this moment, and they turned to look at Lin with astonishment on their faces, as if to say, "Brother, you killed 3 heavenly gods." And Lin's expression was calm and collected, and he even raised his head and puffed out his chest slightly. He had killed the heavenly gods with his own strength, and he didn't steal their lives. So he accepted this praise without any qualms. Tina sent the images of the battle to Bai Ling, and Bai Ling shared them all around the world. The pitiful living beings of the Tai Chu continent stood dumbly in front of the black screen for such a long time. Finally, there was an image. A series of super high-definition images appeared on the big screen, creating a wave of raucous cheers. They had initially wanted to watch a video, but they ended up watching a comic strip instead. Many of the living beings were feeling a little depressed, but they all accepted it. After all, it was better to watch photos than a black screen. War God Lin killed the heavenly reality god. He's so handsome. Crap, he's severely wounded. Who can save our Lin? The Celestial Arch is so powerful. He sent heavenly god Long Kue flying with a single punch. Patriarch Shintong, how did you die? Our patriarch. All of the images created an unprecedented stir on the Tai Chu continent. All of the living beings had the most direct understanding of this battle as they followed the images. They also learned just how intense and thrilling the battle was, and all of their nerves were on edge. At this moment, many emotions of regret welled up in their hearts. How great would it be if they could watch a video? This was the first time that all of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent had gathered together to watch a video. The images played out one after another in chronological order, and it was an extremely thrilling experience. After a long time, all of the images that Tina had recorded were played out. All of the living beings were either subdued by the domineering figures of the Celestial Arch and the battling Buddha, or awed by Lin's heroic performance in slaying 3 heavenly gods, or lamenting the sacrifices of Patriarch Shun Tung and the Dark Thunder Emperor. All of the 4-9 Immortal Sect disciples and elders heaved a collective sigh of relief upon seeing that Lin, Su Xiaolan, and the others were safe and sound. The battle drew to a perfect conclusion. 3 Tao integration stage mythological beasts, 7 heaven pioneers stage great generals, and 5 heavenly gods had all been slain in the divine mirror world. The god-slaying team had completed their mission perfectly. This event undoubtedly set off another massive wave of shock across the entire Tai Chu continent. The god-slaying team instantly dominated all of the major news outlets. Regardless of whether it was the human race or other living beings who opposed the heavenly gods, all of them cheered and celebrated. As for the living beings who were close to the heavenly gods, they felt as if their hearts had been stabbed by a sword. Some of them started to feel uneasy, and some even started to feel fear. The god-slaying team was too sharp and terrifying. What if this blade landed on them? What would they do? How were they supposed to block it? How were they supposed to defend against it? Despair. They were trembling in fear. Although the battle had ended, the far-reaching effects it brought were quickly fermenting and spreading. The Tai Chu continent welcomed a period of great turmoil. On the contrary, the divine mirror world started to slowly calm down. The members of the god-slaying team sat down to meditate. They planned to recover from their injuries before returning to their original world. And Lin also had the time to look at his sea of vital energy. His sea of vital energy was currently very lively. Chapter 1707. The heavenly void beast body of chaotic essence had been devoured by the divine plunder technique and transformed into a little whale in his sea of vital energy. The chaotic nightmare monster was devoured by the divine plunder technique. And just as Lin had expected, it also transformed into a special life form in his sea of vital energy. The only difference was that this special life form was originally an illusion. Now that it had entered the energy sea in a special form, it became even more special. In the vast Qi Sea, an irregular black shadow suddenly shrouded the sky, like a dark cloud pressing down on a city. The wind and clouds suddenly rose, and Kirin, who was riding atop the little whale, opened his eyes, which were flashing with lightning. His red short-sleeved shirt flapped in the wind, and his holy flame cloak fluttered in the wind as his aura soared. He sensed danger. Enemies. Wah! The little whale let loose an ethereal cry of excitement. It had been a long time since he had fought in his Qi Sea. He didn't know what level the enemy he would be facing this time. Last time, there was a lizard dragon at the Return to Void Pinnacle stage, and they had a great time beating it up. It instinctively ignored the dark experience of being tortured by the holy flame vermilion bird and in Kirin upon entering his sea of vital energy. The holy flame vermilion bird was still flying proudly in the sky, as if it had nothing to do with it. Right at this moment, that black shadow revealed countless sharp claws and mouths. It roared as if it wanted to devour and destroy everything, releasing a terrifying aura. It was the strongest life form, the life form that brought the most terrifying nightmare to this world. No matter where it was the absolute king. So all of you surrender to me. However, with this roar, the 3 beings in the sea of Qi immediately exploded. What? He actually dared to strut around in the sea of Qi? You still want to proclaim yourself king? Too young. I have to teach you a lesson. And Kirin was a battle maniac to begin with. The little whale was bored out of his mind. And the holy flame vermilion bird was the type of person that would not attack unless attacked. but if someone attacked it, it would burn their entire family to the ground. The Chaos Nightmare shapeshifter's roar immediately attracted the aggro of the three opponents. The golden light instantly illuminated his chi sea. Countless bolts of golden void lightning exploded upon the Chaotic Nightmare monster's body. Boom, boom, boom. The Chaos Nightmare monster shuddered. The golden lightning tore its body apart and crushed the dark energy around it, making it feel pain. These lightning bolts were not simple. This was the first thought that appeared in the Chaos Nightmare monster's mind. Not only was this golden void lightning the most essential lightning, but it was also imbued with the paramount laws of lightning and could repel all evil. In reality, Kieran's mastery of the Tao of lightning was definitely top-notch. Especially in the sea of vital energy, he could use the power of the heavenly lightning god without any reservations. It was the one who had devoured the lightning heavenly god. So how could its control over lightning not be awesome? On the contrary, the Chaos Nightmare monster was completely suppressed in the Chi Sea, so it could only be the one being taught a lesson. Roar! The Chaotic Nightmare monster immediately retaliated. A special domain of darkness instantly enshrouded in Kieran's sea of vital energy, unleashing boundless terrifying emotional power in an attempt to corrode Kieran's mind. But right at this moment, boundless holy flames blazed through the sky, instantly burning the darkness domain into ashes. Not only that, but the scorching holy flames spread through the void and onto the Chaos Nightmare monster's body, causing it to convulse and wail in agony. The Holy Flame Vermilion Bird also sprang into action. The Holy Flame Vermilion Bird was imbued with the most essential power of the Holy Flame Vermilion Bird, and just a single wisp of it was enough to incinerate an entire world. The Chaotic Nightmare monster, whose power had been suppressed, could only endure the most brutal torment. And Lin was greatly reassured upon seeing this scene in his sea of vital energy. The pets in his sea of vital energy were quite powerful. At the very least, they were invincible in the sea of vital energy. The Chaotic Nightmare monster was still struggling within the holy flames and lightning. It was the most fearsome life form that had transcended beyond the heavenly gods, so it was not going to submit so easily. It immediately charged toward Kieran in the face of the scorching holy flames and lightning before slashing its claws down. Whoosh! And Kieran's body was sliced into 5 or 6 pieces by the lightning-fast darkness. The remaining body parts that were floating in the air were then pulverized by the darkness. The Chaotic Nightmare monster's tattered body surged with elation. So what if Kieran was bad, *SS? He was still going to die under my claws in the end. All enemies that flexed in front of it had to die. The Chaotic Nightmare monster turned its gaze upward. Now that it had taken care of Kieran, it was time to deal with the Holy Flame Vermilion Bird. However, it didn't even get a chance to strike. It was suddenly struck by countless bolts of lightning again. Countless bolts of golden void lightning hurtled toward it from afar before puncturing its body. The Chaotic Nightmare monster almost exploded with rage upon seeing this. How was Kieran still alive and completely unscathed? The battle erupted once again, and Kieran recovered to his peak condition and was like a ferocious wolf. The Holy Flame Vermilion Bird flew high and mighty, incinerating all things with its scorching holy flames. The Chaotic Nightmare monster's body was ravaged again, and it expended all of its strength to finally kill Kieran again. However, Kieran was resurrected 3 seconds later with full health. A sense of despair welled up in the Chaotic Nightmare monster's heart for the first time. He's cheating. He's definitely cheating. I'm going to report him. The Chaotic Nightmare monster let loose an extremely blood-curdling roar of rage. In its rage, it swallowed Kieran whole. It wanted to digest this annoying bastard like it did the heavenly illusion god. However, Kieran suddenly self-detonated in its stomach, and the devastating golden void lightning instantly pulverized the Chaotic Nightmare monster's body, and Kieran had become the Chaotic Nightmare monster's nightmare. This was a battle of life and death. However, and Kieran had countless lives, while the chaotic nightmare monster felt like it only had one life. After what seemed like an eternity, the chaotic nightmare monster finally lay feebly in his sea of vital energy. The golden void, lightning, and holy flames were still wreaking havoc on its body, whipping it to its heart's content. The chaotic nightmare monster's life force was extremely terrifying, but it had become a weakness here. It was very likely that it was going to be subjected to endless torture. At this moment, Lin's heart stirred, and he transmitted a command to the little whale. The little whale had already been tamed into submission by Kieran. The unruly spatial mighty figure was nowhere to be seen, and it was now an adorable little whale. And Kieran's master was its master as well. Hence, it had to obey Lin's command. The little whale faltered slightly upon hearing Lin's command before a hesitant expression appeared on its face. In the end, it still decided to swim toward the chaotic nightmare monster. The chaotic nightmare monster shuddered upon seeing what it was. It had almost forgotten that there was still a living being that hadn't attacked it yet. Was it finally going to show itself now? The little whale's head was round, and its body glowed with an inky black luster. Its large, harmless eyes blinked with a benevolent yet innocent expression, and it was very easy to soften one's heart and make them lower their guard. The chaotic nightmare monster didn't dare to get complacent, and it immediately raised its guard. However, before it had a chance to do anything, it was greeted by the sight of a cavernous mouth opening wide before instantly obscuring the entire heaven and earth. No, the chaotic nightmare monster was horrified, and it stumbled back in retreat. Then, its world plunged into absolute darkness. The chaotic nightmare monster, which could swallow heavenly gods, had been swallowed alive by the little whale. Chapter 1708. Burp. The little whale's stomach expanded, and it burped loudly. Void beasts were most proficient in devouring. Devour the heavens, devour the earth, devour the void. Now that the little whale had unleashed its full combat prowess, it wouldn't be an issue for it to swallow a chaotic nightmare monster that was on the brink of death. After all, it had an immortal body in its sea of vital energy, so it wasn't afraid of getting a stomachache. And Kieran and the holy flame vermilion bird were both given quite a fright by this, and they stared blankly at the little whale's bulging stomach, as if they were afraid that something would escape from its stomach. To be honest, there really was a change. Dense black mist began to emanate from the little whale's body, which then transformed into an extremely intimidating pair of black mist wings. The fish had grown wings. Was it planning to roam the nine heavens? Not only that, but its aura also suddenly became terrifying. That kind of terrifying and destructive aura was enough to make all living beings tremble. This was the aura of a chaos nightmare demon. No, it was the aura released by the fusion of the chaos nightmare monster and the body of chaos essence. It was purer, more concrete, and more terrifying. Not only were Lin and the holy flame vermilion bird given a fright, but even their master, and Lin, was struck by an indescribably terrifying aura. It was also at this moment that Lin suddenly felt as if his connection with the little whale had become even stronger. This feeling was similar to the connection he had with Kieran. He could communicate directly with Kieran, and he could even use his power. The little whale had evolved. After swallowing the chaos nightmare monster, it had truly transformed. This transformation allowed it to cross the barrier of the Chi Sea and communicate directly with Lin. And Lin raised his hand and pointed forward. Within his sea of vital energy, the little whale's heart jolted, and power rose from his sea of vital energy before converging on his fingertips along his meridians. Buzz, a black, suddenly appeared on the tip of his finger. A terrifying, devouring power seemed to want to devour everything around it. The terrifying and destructive spiritual power contained within it made the surrounding space feel like an abyss. The celestial arch, Dongfang Zhuangshi, the battling Buddha, and Su Xiaolan immediately drew their weapons in fear. "Hey, don't be nervous. It's me," and Lin said apologetically. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Mr. and Lin, don't forget to tell me in advance next time you're experimenting with a spell technique. I was meditating to recover from my injuries when I suddenly stood up and my back almost snapped. Dongfang Zhuangshi wore a resigned expression. My little heart can't take this kind of stimulation. Emperor Ziwei wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. This aura is way too terrifying, and it's the aura of a chaotic nightmare monster. How did you do this, brother Lin? The battling Buddha's eyes lit up as he circled around Lin and stared at the black light on his fingertip. In truth, if not for the fact that Lin's attack carried the aura of a primal chaos nightmare, the crowd wouldn't have reacted so violently. Su Xiaolan held Lin's arm and said with a smile, "And Lin has always had power based on what he eats. Isn't it nonsense for you to ask this?" Everyone was speechless when they heard this. It was exactly because of this that it was strange. And Lin canceled his spell, his heart filled with shock. He had only unleashed a wisp of his power just then, and it had achieved such an effect. He really didn't dare to imagine what it would be like to unleash the little whale's full power. This was the great Tao of engulfment. Not just engulfment, but it could also unleash all types of mental attacks. It could be said that it first scared the enemy, then engulfed the enemy. It had a very high accuracy rate, and there were many interesting things that could happen after the engulfment. And Lin was already getting a little excited. The power of the chaotic nightmare monster and the power of the body of chaotic essence had been perfectly combined. He really wanted to find something to practice with and see just how powerful this technique was. However, he repressed the urge in the end and decided to wait until they got out of here. Within his sea of vital energy, everything had been settled, and Kieran sat on the little whale's head with a yearning expression. The little whale's body had grown a little larger, and a pair of black wings had grown on either side of its body. Aside from that, there were no other changes. It might have become more powerful, but that was not important. And Lin fell into deep thought. The little whale was actually quite different from Kieran's holy flame vermilion bird. He had conceived in Kieran during his tribulation transcendence, while the holy flame vermilion bird was born after he absorbed the essential holy flame of the vermilion bird, as well as the essential blood essence of the vermilion bird. Both of them were powers that had been birthed from his own efforts. However, the little whale was not one of them. He had obtained the little whale from the heavenly void beast. Even though Lin could keep it in his sea of vital energy, it was very difficult for him to use its power. After that, Lin made the little whale swallow the chaotic nightmare monster, and the two powers fused together, thereby breaking through the barrier between them. Hence, this had to have something to do with the chaotic nightmare monster. The chaotic nightmare monster was a life form created by the heavenly illusion god. This had exceeded the current limit of the powers of the heavenly gods, which meant that it had transcended beyond the power of the heavenly Tao. And Lin seemed to have realized something, and he murmured to himself, "A life form and power that transcends beyond the power of the heavenly Tao. Perhaps he would be pleasantly surprised if he studied the little whale in the future." He could set this aside for now, and Lin began to meditate and focus on recovering his energy. Not long after that, an exquisitely beautiful fairy descended from the sky. She was bathed in a boundless divine light before arriving beside Lin. Giant Lin, a voice that was as pleasant to the ears as a clear spring sounded. And Lin opened his eyes, and he was greeted by the sight of a fairy with a vibrant smile on her face. Tina was brimming with divine power, and she looked even more beautiful and enchanting than before. Her emerald eyes were extremely vibrant, and she made no effort to conceal the joy in her heart. The current Tina was much more adorable than when she had killed heavenly goddess Wu Ming, and Lin couldn't help but pinch her delicate cheek with a smile. "Congratulations, little Na. The divine mirror world has leveled up again." Su Xiaolan also made her way over to them, and she latched onto Tina's hand with a smile. "Little Na, it's all thanks to you that I was able to progress to the Tao integration intermediate stage." "Thank you, big sister Xiaolan. There's no need to be so polite." Tina stuck out her tongue in a mischievous manner. Little Huang was quite dejected. "Chirp, chirp, chirp. Su Xiaolan, and Enlin had received the blessings of the divine mirror world, but little Huang had been left to the side. This made him feel quite dejected and sad. Tina patted little Huang's head with a comforting smile. Little Huang, your bloodline is so good, and you were once a mythological beast at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. All you need to do now is recover your strength. I can't waste my blessings on you. It's more reasonable to give them to Xiaolan. Chirp, chirp. Little Huang nodded in understanding. Tina was actually quite selfish. She liked Enlin the most, followed by Su Xiaolan. Hence, she had to consider these two first if there were any benefits to be reaped. As for the other members of the God-slaying team, they were definitely secondary considerations. After all, the evolution of the divine mirror world benefited all living beings in this world. As super mighty figures, they definitely benefited immensely as well. It was not as if they had not benefited at all. Everyone rested for a while longer before returning to the Tai Chu continent. Chapter 1709. On the 4-9 Immortal Sex Tao Plaza, a gargantuan screen was still broadcasting the battle in the divine mirror world. It was currently replaying the battle, but over 100,000 powerful beings had yet to leave. They were all looking intently at the screen, waiting for the return of their heroes. "Let's go, Ian," a gentle and mundane man said in a gentle voice. "Huh, are we not going to wait for Enlin and the others to come out?" The young woman faltered slightly upon hearing this. The man scratched the young woman's nose with a smile. "We've already seen what we wanted to see, and we know the outcome of the battle, so there's nothing to be regretful about." "All right, I'll do as you say." Li Yin latched onto the man's arm and nodded obediently. This man was none other than the paramount god of the ghost tribe, Patriarch Zhu Yin. He wore a relaxed smile on his face, and he stepped forward before disappearing on the spot. There were no spatial fluctuations, and no living beings noticed them. "Sai, I'm so envious. Trampling on the heavenly human and slaying the heavenly gods. This is a battle that I yearn to fight alongside." His words were like a light breeze that blew past before being drowned out by the raucous chatter. All of the powerful beings present were still discussing spiritedly among themselves as they stared at the screen with reverence on their faces. No one knew that this paramount god of the ghost tribe had once stood with them and witnessed such a grand battle. 1 hour later, a burst of white light suddenly appeared in the air above the Tao Plaza, obscuring everyone's vision. The blinding light made all of the powerful beings present feel dizzy and dazed. When they came to their senses, a group of figures had already appeared on the Tao Plaza. Raucous cheers and congratulations instantly erupted from the Tao Plaza. The heroes had returned. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, the Celestial Arch, Dongfeng Zhuangshi, the Chaotic Element Martial Lord, Black Spirit Snake, White Spirit Snake, Tina, Little Huang, Emperor Zui, the Ancient Dragon Empress, and the Battling Buddha. Their names were being chanted by over 100,000 powerful beings on the Tao Plaza. They were being chanted by billions of living beings on the Tai Chu continent. These names were renowned across the entire continent, and they had become the most dazzling stars of the Tai Chu continent. And Lin looked at the experts who had come from all over the world. His white robes fluttered elegantly in the wind, and his voice was clear, gentle, and imposing as he said, "The God Massacre Team's execution mission has been successfully completed. All the heavenly gods have been killed. Those who offend the 9 regions and the human race will end up like the heavenly gods in the images." As soon as he said that, a tsunami of cheers erupted from the crowd, and Lin's reputation had reached a peak. Even if he was showing off, none of the experts present felt uncomfortable. Instead, they felt that it was only natural. This was a peerless hero who was loved by his allies and feared by his enemies. And Lin also brought back the bodies of Patriarch Shuntung and the Dark Thunder Emperor. Patriarch Shuntung was still fine. He still had some vines and remains. The Dark Thunder Emperor had been reduced to specks of light by heavenly goddess Wu Ming's sword strike, leaving nothing behind. Lin and the others decided to bring back some soil from where he had fallen. This was the last thing he had left in this world. All of the powerful beings or descendants of the two emperors, hugged the bodies of their patriarchs and wept with tears streaming down their faces. These two were both heroes of the human race and even the entire continent. Enlin held a grand funeral for them. After everything had been settled, 9 days had already passed. During this period of time, the situation on the continent was rapidly changing. In the past, many living beings thought that the human race had already entered a countdown to death. No matter how much they struggled, it would be useless, and the extinction of the entire human race was inevitable. But now, many of the beings of the various forces had a different opinion of him. Perhaps, the human race was going to make a comeback? Even after such a huge commotion, the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army still hadn't said anything. In fact, they hadn't even said anything. At the 4-9 Immortal Sect, after resting for a while, the God Massacre team returned to their respective positions. Enlin ate spirit fruits and basked in the sun every day, finally recovering to his peak condition. After stirring up a few major events, the Heavenly Human Tribe retreated strategically, and the world became a very beautiful place. Fanny, I'll be counting on you for this. Enlin tossed a storage ring to the woman before him. Fanny accepted the storage ring with a solemn expression. Don't worry, even though my father is neutral, the Heavenly Human Tribe doesn't care if he accepts requests for business. Her father was the #1 pill refinement master of the Ghost Tribe, as well as the top pill refinement master of the entire Tai Chu continent, Pill Sage Dominic. There were 600 million spirit stones in the storage ring that Enlin had given her. She had spent so much money just to ask Dominic to refine 2 divine pills for her. The Pill Sage's status was extremely high. Asking him to refine pills for her didn't just require money. It also depended on whether he was in a good mood. Even if he was in a good mood, she would still have to prepare the ingredients herself. On top of that, asking him to refine pills for her would also depend on the race. This was especially so during a sensitive period like this. If the human race wanted to ask him to refine pills for them, that would be a fantasy story. Enlin was doing exactly that. However, he wasn't stupid enough to ask the Pill Sage to refine pills for him. He gave Fanny money and asked her to ask the Pill Sage to refine pills for her. His daughter suddenly had money, so she asked her father to refine pills for her. The Pill Sage was refining pills for his daughter, and this was a matter of course. This was fatherly love. As for who his daughter would hand over the pills to, that wasn't something that he could control. Fanny gladly accepted the order and immediately set off for the opposite shore realm. Enlin looked on with anticipation at her departing figure. 600 million spirit stones was already half of his wealth. Hopefully, the divine pills he refined would live up to his expectations. After experiencing a few battles of life and death, he was already very open about things like money. The spirit stones lying in the storage ring weren't considered money. Only the spirit stones that were actually used were considered money. Enlin wanted to spend money. If it weren't for the fact that all of the divine rank materials in the Pill Pagoda could only refine 2 divine pills, Enlin would have most likely spent all of his 120 million spirit stones on divine pills. Chong, he had once refined a divine pill for Enlin, which cost 100 million spirit stones. That was actually only the lowest ranked divine pill. Now, Enlin was asking the Pill Sage to refine high-ranked divine pills for him. Each divine pill was comparable in value to a divine tool, and their effects were definitely going to be astonishing. 1 divine pill was for recovery. 1 divine pill was for temporary burst of power. There was probably no one on the entire continent who would use divine pills as expendable as Enlin. This was the equivalent of sacrificing a divine tool as soon as a fight broke out. However, Enlin had the courage to do so. He was very much looking forward to seeing just how bad *SS he would become after swallowing a divine pill in the near future. There was one more important thing that he had to do now. Giant Enlin, are you ready? Tina asked with a dainty smile. I'm ready. Enlin took a deep breath and stood up from his lounge chair with a determined expression on his face. Let's go eat the sun. Chapter 1710. Enlin's mission to progress to the return to Void final stage was to swallow a sun. Furthermore, He had to swallow a real sun, not a fake one summoned by Xiaohong. That was a little terrifying. One had to realize that just the true flames of a real sun could easily melt the stomach of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure, and that was not even taking into account the explosive energy contained within. Thankfully, Enlin had the goddess of creation, Tina, who was a walking cheat in human form. Tina could create a new sun for him. It would be the least powerful one. The entire 4-9 Immortal sect erupted into a frenzy upon hearing that Enlin was going to eat a sun. All of his friends at the 4-9 Immortal sect all requested to enter the divine mirror world to witness Enlin eating a sun. Enlin initially refused this unreasonable request, but he couldn't withstand all of the threats, and he gave in the end. Within the divine mirror world, on a vast and boundless plain, all of the onlookers stared at the man in the distance with scorching eyes. I told you that big brother and was going to F***CK the heavens. Look, he's going to eat his son now, woof. Dabai wagged his tongue with excitement. There's nothing Master can't do. Swallowing a sun is just a prelude. He's going to swallow this entire sky sooner or later. Shui Zhantian flapped his little wings with excitement. He then received a smack on the head from Tina. I am the sky. Tina glared at Shui Zhantian with an indifferent expression. Asking Enlin to swallow me? Is he trying to die? Shui Zhantian's round body recoiled slightly at the sight of little Na's menacing expression, and he corrected himself. I just woke up, so I'm a little delirious. I'm talking about the heavens of the Tai Chu continent. Su Qinyun's dreamy blue eyes widened with curiosity. Why does classmate Enlin want to eat a sun? Is a sun delicious? How does it taste? How does it feel after eating it? Don't ask me about this. I don't know either. Goddess of creation Tina expressed that this was a blind spot in her knowledge. At this moment, Enlin waved his hand and shouted from afar, indicating that he was ready. Tina's body floated up into the air. It was nighttime in the divine mirror world right now, so the sudden appearance of a small sun in the sky was probably going to scare many adorable beings in the divine mirror world. But it didn't matter. In any case, they had already been frightened by the heaven and earth anomaly. It wasn't a big deal to be frightened a few more times. I'm going to create a sun. An unparalleled aura erupted from Tina's body. It was the aura of a god, the aura of the creator, the most noble aura in the world. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, and the others couldn't help but worship the fairy in the sky. Bai Ling's eyes shimmered with excitement. This world is awesome, and Tina is also awesome. As she spoke, she couldn't help but caress the coffin beside her. This coffin was prepared for Enlin. However, it was not a blood soul jade coffin, but a real coffin. Bai Ling had analyzed all types of data and determined that Enlin would definitely die if he swallowed the sun. So she had prepared a coffin for him in advance. This coffin was warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and it could automatically update its music. Furthermore, it could preserve the body's freshness, so, theoretically speaking, it could preserve the body forever. Of course, the prerequisite was that there was still a corpse left behind after Enlin swallowed the sun. Bai Ling and the others were a good 500 kilometers away from Enlin. In order to obtain a high-definition image of Enlin swallowing the sun, Bai Ling had set up a large screen with adjustable focal length for the live broadcast. In some ways, Bai Ling was quite reliable. Soon, Tina began to create a sun. Extract essence. Tina waved a hand, and a burst of essential power of Yang converged from all directions in the world. The Tao was split into Yin and Yang, and the sun was the embodiment of the power of Yang. The essential power of Yang was compressed by Tina, and it converged into a speck of light, which was like a twinkling star in the distance. The speck of light became brighter and brighter, as if it were a star that was constantly approaching. Boom! All of a sudden, the speck of light exploded before expanding at an incredible speed. A peerlessly dazzling light almost blinded Dabai. The great sun-illuminated world was instantly restored to heaven and earth. That's right, it was clearly night, but a brand new sun had appeared in the sky. All of the living beings in the divine mirror world were astonished. All of the living beings with powerful cultivation bases turned toward the direction of the sun with shock and bewilderment in their eyes. In the human territory, all of the top-grade telescopes and satellites were activated to quickly determine the location of the sun. However, no matter how hard they tried, that place was isolated by a strange power, as if it were shrouded in mist. They could only make out the faint outline of a sun rising in the eastern sky. The sun wasn't actually very large. In fact, it could even be said to be very small. It only appeared large because it was so close to the sun. Tina's eyes reflected the entire world, and her hands danced through the air as she extracted one item after another from the world. The essential power of Yang has been completed, injecting the essence of the golden crow, the essential power of matter. Heavenly Tao enhancement, life enhancement, karma enhancement, true enhancement. Her creation state had already transcended to a certain level. Everyone had a puzzled look on their faces, but they still felt that it was awesome. Only Xiao Hong was watching with rapt interest. In fact, she was so excited that tears were flowing from her eyes. The process of creating the sun was really amazing. Boundless inspiration and enlightenment were boundless. She even felt like she could prepare for the Tao integration stage after witnessing this sun creation process. Soon, a complete sun appeared in the divine mirror world. Sun creation was a massive project. Even though the divine mirror world was already a very high-level world and Tina had a lot of authority, her features were still extremely pale after the sun was created. Jine and Lin, I've created a sun. What do you think? Tina turned to the white-robed man in the distance, as if she were asking for credit. And Lin looked up at the sun in the sky, and his legs almost gave out from under him. I told you to create the weakest sun. This is the smallest sun. I've used the lowest amount of basic elements. Any weaker, and it'll be a fake sun, Tina explained in a loud voice. And Lin looked up at the sun in the sky and fell silent. The sun was boundless, as if it were going to blot out the entire sky. It was at least 100 kilometers in diameter. Its terrifyingly high temperatures had already scorched the earth red and even melted it into streams of lava. The scorching energy on the surface of the sun surged and exploded over and over again like a pulsating pulse, sending waves of heat that could even set leaves alight from tens of thousands of kilometers away. Even the spectators hiding thousands of kilometers away were struck by the scorching heat and had to unleash spell techniques to keep the heat at bay, let alone Lin, who was standing right under the sun. If it weren't for the fact that his cultivation base was extremely high, he would have been melted into a puddle of liquid already. This is a little sun. You call it a little sun? And Lin's teeth chattered as his flesh crawled as he looked up at the terrifying sun. I'll die. I'll die if I eat this. This was a scorching sun with a diameter of over 100 kilometers. Chapter 17:11. And Lin was very panicked, and a hint of fear welled up in his heart. It couldn't be helped. Anyone who faced such a blazing sun would feel the same way. He was simply too minuscule compared to the sun, like an ant. But now, this ant wanted to swallow the sun. Go, master. You're the best. Shui Zhantian yelled. The sun is so cute. Why do you want to eat it? Wah! Xiao Hong couldn't bear to watch this. Eating a sun is such a fun thing to do. I have to record it. Bai Ling tossed an automatic camera ball into the air. Holy leader, we're going to be fried after eating the sun, right? The blood in your body will be roasted dry, right? Why don't you put your blood into my body first? I'll keep it safe for you. Cassidy licked her lips with a scorching light in her eyes. And Lin was greatly encouraged by the sincere encouragement from his friends, and he began to float toward the sun. If he wanted to progress to the return to void final stage, swallowing the sun created by Tina was the best way to do so. How could he not try? So, how am I supposed to swallow such a huge sun? And Lin was a little dumbstruck as he looked up at the approaching sun. So be it, I'll change my position. The sun was above, and he was below, so he couldn't swallow it. He had to be above, and the sun was below. Thus, Lin flew above the sun and looked down at it, but he still found it difficult to swallow it. It was too big. The gargantuan sun was like a boundless, flaming continent, and he felt his scalp tingle no matter where he went. The surrounding air had already been warped by the scorching heat of the sun, and waves of scorching heat waves swept toward him, as if it were mocking Enlin for his overestimation. Giant Enlin, you can slowly absorb it, Tina reminded. She couldn't interfere with Enlin's mission, nor could she change the reality of the sun, but she could provide some useful suggestions. Enlin's eyes lit up slightly, and he nodded before activating his engulfment cultivation method to absorb the sun. As if it were a glass of fruit juice, the sun shuddered, and scorching power surged toward Enlin's mouth like a massive river. Gulugu. An indescribable heat seemed to explode in his mouth. The extreme energy flowed from his throat to his entire body, and his body became boiling hot. The energy on the surface of the sun was actually not particularly hot. It was only a few thousand degrees, or even tens of thousands of degrees. It could melt steel, but it was still wishful thinking to melt his body. He was a man who possessed the body of the war god. However, although the energy couldn't melt his body, it made him feel like he was being burned. The blazing yang energy collided in every part of his body and was then absorbed. If this situation continued, he would explode on the spot in less than a minute. No, I can't swallow this sun like this, and Lin was still sucking in the energy like a whale, but the size of the sun in front of him didn't change at all. Countless golden flames converged to form a great river, surging into Enlin's mouth. It seemed very exaggerated, but in reality, it was only a drop in the ocean. He had to think of something, or else he would be stuffed to death. This was an impossible task to begin with, and anyone who encountered it would shrink back. However, Enlin did not believe it. He wanted to complete this mission. Gulu. Enlin continued to devour the energy of the sun. Just the energy on the outskirts of the sun made him feel like his entire body was on fire. He didn't even dare to imagine what would happen if he continued to devour the energy 10 minutes later. Enlin's skin had already become extremely crimson. His blood, flesh, meridians, and bones were all filled with the essence of the sun, and the yang energy within his body had reached a bottleneck. What do I do? What do I do? Enlin looked down at the sun, and his mouth continued to open and close. He was already extremely anxious. Even though his body had reached its limit, he still did not stop devouring the energy of the sun. Right at this moment, an extremely peculiar feeling welled up in his heart. The energy of the sun seemed to have broken through some kind of shackle and reached the depths of his body. His sea of vital energy surged, and some kind of resonance appeared within his body. Within his boundless sea of vital energy, the little whale raised its head, and its round eyes seemed to be able to pierce through the sea of vital energy as it looked into Enlin's eyes. Within the divine mirror world, Enlin's mouth opened wider and wider, and an absolute black hole appeared within his mouth. This hole was even more terrifying than a black hole, as if it could engulf and destroy all things. Even the laws of heaven and earth were unable to escape its wrath. An aura of absolute horror and destruction began to proliferate forth. Wah! An ethereal sound erupted from Enlin's mouth. Boom! A massive suction force suddenly erupted, and the sun down below began to tremor. Its round body of flames was sucked dry by Enlin until it looked like there was an extra strand of hair on its bald head. At the same time, the speed at which the energy of the sun flowed into Enlin's mouth increased tenfold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold. All of the spectators in the distance were given a fright upon seeing this. Holy F***CK. What's going on with the holy leader? Won't he explode if he eats like that? Insane. He's insane. What a powerful engulfment spell technique. This is the power of the chaotic nightmare monster. Who would have thought that he would be able to use this ability so quickly? I told you that our Enlin is reliable. He wouldn't do anything that he wasn't confident in. He's engulfing the sun way too quickly. Where did all the energy go? All of the spectators stared at Enlin with shock and concern on their faces. Meanwhile, Enlin was already in a very good state of mind. He was using the little whale's engulfment ability to directly engulf the energy of the sun into his sea of vital energy. As such, the energy of the sun wouldn't be able to harm him. In the air above Lin's sea of vital energy, a massive ball of golden flames was converging and compressing. The sun in the divine mirror world became smaller and smaller, while the ball of flames in his sea of vital energy became larger and larger. That's right, his physical body was unable to contain the entire sun, but his sea of vital energy could. And Lin felt as if the clouds had parted to reveal the moon. He was so excited that he almost burst into tears. His hopeless situation had finally been resolved. However, he soon realized that he had been too naive. The energy around the sun was quickly absorbed by him, and Lin began to lick the core of the sun. However, the temperature within the core was over 10 million degrees Celsius. If it was exposed to the outside world, it would be able to incinerate heaven and earth and melt all things. Boundless light and peerlessly scorching temperatures flowed toward Lin's mouth in their liquid form. Even though they didn't come into direct contact with Lin's body, they still incinerated his hair, melted his clothes, and charred his skin to a crisp. The essence of the sun was so hot that it was almost white. Even if it didn't come into direct contact with living beings, it would still be able to destroy them. However, Lin couldn't stop. His engulfment spell technique was helping him absorb most of the heat. If he were to stop engulfing the sun, he would have to face the heat from the core of the sun, which would be even more terrifying, and Lin was already in a dire situation, so he could only continue to engulf the sun. At this point, he had no choice but to engulf the sun even if he didn't want to. All of the spectators were already letting loose cries of surprise upon seeing this. Su Xiaolin couldn't help but charge toward Lin. Bai Ling also abruptly slapped the coffin. Chapter 17:12. And Lin swore that he had never been in such agony before. He was on the brink of death, but he still had to persevere. Tears were about to fall from his eyes, only to be evaporated by the sun. It was as if he wasn't swallowing the sun, but rather someone was roasting him on top of it. And Lin was still engulfing the sun, and a black light flashed within his mouth as a boundless engulfment power erupted from within. The sun became smaller and smaller, but also became more and more dazzling. After Lin swallowed the outer layer, the core that was revealed was a vast expanse of pure white, true essence of the sun. It was extremely hot, and the power of Yang was also extremely concentrated. It flowed into Lin's mouth like a viscous liquid. Gulp, 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 tonk, 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 tonk. And Lin was still being forced to swallow, and it was as if he were drinking the strongest alcohol in the world, an alcohol that could set him on fire. His sea of vital energy was already surging with heat waves, and it was even beginning to evaporate from the scorching power of the sun. And Kirin was given quite a fright, and he bombarded the sun relentlessly with lightning, but to no avail. The holy flame vermilion bird surveyed the sun with a curious expression, but it didn't do anything. Instead, it swallowed a mouthful of saliva, as if it was drooling with desire. The massive fireball above his sea of vital energy rose higher and higher, expanding the space within his sea of vital energy as well. As the energy from the core of the sun was absorbed into his sea of vital energy, the massive fireball gained the essence of Yang, the essence of the golden crow, and the essence of matter. An extremely pure aura of the sun began to emanate from it. Within the divine mirror world, Lin's consciousness was already blurry from the scorching heat, and he was only holding on through sheer willpower. He was really afraid that the sun would incinerate him before he could completely engulf the sun. Lin was no longer in pain. In fact, it would be more accurate to say that all of his pain receptors had been completely incinerated, so there was no way for him to transmit any sense of pain to his brain. Only his consciousness was still suffering from the excruciating pain. That's right, this miniature sun could even roast his consciousness. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally swallowed the last bit of white liquid, and the world began to darken. Classmate Lin, Master, Holy Leader. All of his friends immediately rushed toward Lin. Bai Ling had already prepared a coffin a long time ago, and she was the fastest among them as she kicked the coffin in front of her. The white transparent coffin soared into the sky, and flew towards Enlin, who was falling from the sky. The coffin lid automatically opened and caught Enlin before automatically closing the coffin lid, turning into a coffin on the ground in one go. The group of friends rushed to the coffin with red eyes and looked at Enlin inside. Su Xiaolan even covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filled with disbelief. Enlin's entire body was scorched black like charcoal. He was so burnt that even his face was starting to become indistinguishable. 9,999% of the body has been burned. 0.1% of the body's bodily functions remain. His vital signs are extremely weak. The cold voice of the coffin sounded, as if it was announcing the death of the man inside. It was also at this moment that Su Qinyun, Xinyuan Cheng, Dabai, Shuizhantian, Cassidy, and the others all cast powerful healing spell techniques toward Enlin without any hesitation. Su Xiaolan even pulled out an immortal pill from her storage ring and was just about to feed it to Enlin. However, Bai Ling immediately stopped her. In a situation like this, even if he swallows an immortal pill, it won't do anything as his body can no longer absorb the energy from the immortal pill. Then what do? Su Xiaolan's heart was burning with anxiety. Don't worry, I have a special divine liquid. Even if Enlin dies, I'll be able to snatch him back from the hands of the heavens. A confident expression appeared on Bai Ling's face as she abruptly slapped the transparent coffin before her. The coffin instantly began to tremor violently as bursts of extremely dazzling blue liquid flowed from the bottom of the coffin, soaking Enlin's body before healing his injuries at a rate discernible to the naked eye. The Purple Star's life engineering technology has already developed to the point where it can summon souls. I'm confident that I can save Enlin in his current condition, Bai Ling said in an indifferent voice. Everyone was struck by a sense of awe and veneration upon hearing this. The advanced technology of the Purple Star was constantly refreshing their imaginations. Bai Ling was quite reliable in certain aspects, so everyone was finally able to rest their hearts at ease. 2 hours later, all of Enlin's injuries had been healed. 1 day later, Enlin's internal injuries had been completely healed. 3 days later, Enlin awakened from his coffin. Enlin was greeted by the sight of the unfamiliar coffin lid, as well as the crowd gathered around it, all of whom were staring at him in awe. Hey, he's awake, Woof. Enlin, how do you feel now? Master is bad, *SS. You really swallowed a sun. Let's swallow the heavens next time. Classmate Enlin, how did the sun taste? Only explosions are eternal truths and the true meaning of life. The essence of the sun is also explosions. Classmate Enlin, have you attained enlightenment? All of them were discussing spiritedly among themselves. They were all extremely elated to see Enlin awaken. Enlin was also very thankful that he was still alive. Back when he swallowed the sun, he really felt like he was about to be burned to death. He didn't want to go through that terrifying experience a second time. Immediately afterward, he sensed his own aura, upon which his expression faltered. What's going on? My cultivation base didn't increase. Enlin's eyes widened, and he felt as if a sword had been stabbed viciously into his heart. His head was also starting to spin. He had clearly swallowed the sun. Why was it that he had risked his life to complete an impossible mission, but he hadn't progressed to the return to void final stage? Enlin hurriedly turned his gaze toward the system. The system's cultivation base tab had already changed. Return to void final stage, swallowed a sun. Mission completion rate, 2 out of 100. Could it be that he had only completed 2% after swallowing a sun? He had to swallow 50 suns to complete the mission? Oh my God, are you trying to kill me? Enlin's body trembled violently, and he almost fainted from rage again. No, something's not right. His eyes glazed over at the mission on the system, upon which he discovered that something was amiss. He took a deep breath before focusing his gaze again. There was something like a progress bar, and it was slowly increasing. The mission completion rate was slowly increasing, and Lin seemed to have understood something, and he immediately turned his gaze toward his sea of vital energy. A dazzling sun hung high in the sky above his sea of vital energy emanating boundless light. The dim sea of vital energy was now extremely bright, and Kirin, the little whale, and the holy flame vermilion bird were all happily playing around in the sea of vital energy. There was finally a light in their home, and Lin fell silent as he looked at the vibrant life force in his sea of vital energy. There was finally another strange thing in his sea of vital energy, and Lin could even sense that the sun in his sea of vital energy was developing vigorously, as if it were something that was about to hatch. It was as if it was about to evolve upon reaching a certain critical point. And Lin carefully stared at the progress bar before silently calculating the time. In the end, he came to a conclusion that was pleasantly surprising. In 100 days, he would be able to progress to the return to void final stage. Chapter 17:13. And Lin had finally completed the sun-swallowing mission to a satisfactory degree. As a result, he had achieved a legendary achievement, which was to swallow a sun. This achievement should be able to shock and awe many people. Everyone was also filled with admiration toward Lin. Even Xin Yuancheng had developed a sense of reverence toward Lin. Anyone who could swallow a sun was worthy of respect, no matter where they went. And Lin stood up from the coffin and stretched his slightly stiff body. Even now, his skin was still twitching and trembling uncontrollably. It was clear that the nightmarish experience he had just gone through left him with a peculiar trauma. "Jine and Lin, are you all right?" Tina flew toward him with a concerned expression, and Lin nodded. "I'm fine. Let's go back." "You guys go back first. I still have some things to do in the Divine Mirror World. The Divine Mirror World will be closed for 49 days. I'll see you in 49 days. Tina smiled. "What is it? You're closing the Divine Mirror World?" And Lin was curious. Tina blinked. "That's a secret, but it's a good thing. When Little Knot comes out, I'll give you a surprise, Jine and Lin." A hint of anticipation welled up in Lin's heart upon hearing this. Everyone began to depart from the Divine Mirror World. Life was back on track again. They either began to cultivate or to carry out missions. Dongfang Zhuangshi brought the chaotic life core to the Time City. He was going to use it to stabilize Dongfang Mengjie's life, then conduct all types of daring experiments in an attempt to restore the flow of time to Dongfang Mengjie. Xiaohong mentioned that she wanted to go into seclusion for the first time, and this gave Lin a huge fright. When did Lil Red, who had always been cultivating like a salted fish, become so motivated? After that, Lin discovered that the seclusion Xiaohong was talking about was photosynthesizing silently on the summit of the full moon mountain. It was actually the same as before. It was just that she was cultivating in a different location. Lin would fight with Da by whenever he had nothing to do, discuss heaven-crushing techniques with Little Tian, study spell techniques with Xiaolan, and taste new pills with Su Qianyu. Thus, he was living a carefree life. The blissful days flew by quickly, and in the blink of an eye, another 10 days had passed. And Lin's progress bar for swallowing the sun had already reached 12%. Aside from that, the 4-9 Immortal Sect received another major event. Yi Ling was about to make another breakthrough. As Lin's second disciple, Yi Ling's aptitude defied the natural order. She had progressed to the return to void stage in her 20s, stunning the entire kingdom of the 9 states and even the entire Taichu continent. She was hailed as the #1 genius of the younger generation in that era. Missing in Celestial Immortal, the #1 goddess of the United University of Cultivation, the #1 killing immortal of the kingdom of the 9 states. All these accolades made her extremely dazzling. Many people thought that she would continue to advance triumphantly. However, for the next few decades, she did not make a breakthrough in her realm. It was as if she had stagnated. If it were any other return to void stage mighty figure, it would be understandable, as it would be normal for their cultivation base to stagnate for tens of thousands of years. However, Yiling's aptitude defied the natural order, and she had reached the return of void stage in her 20s. However, she had still not progressed to the return to void intermediate stage in 80 years. This was a little perplexing. Some people said that the heavens were jealous of Yi Ling and that the heavenly Tao was blocking her path. There were also people who said that Yi Ling's aptitude had been completely depleted by her, and she was destined to be stuck at the return to void initial stage forever. There were even some who speculated that Yi Ling's cultivation base was a result of consuming pills in a frenzy. Normal prodigies wouldn't be able to progress so quickly, and she was only able to progress to the return to void initial stage through sheer luck. Of course, all of these negative speculations were going to be debunked today. Yi Ling sat on the Dao Plaza with her eyes tightly closed. Her luscious black hair was tied into a ponytail, and her black Taoist robe was wrapped around her slender body, giving her an extremely carefree appearance. As the Lord of Transcendence, Enlin stood beside her to protect her. She's my disciple, so I'll leave the golden void lightning to you. Dark clouds surged in the sky above, and lightning crackled as if the might of lightning was about to reach the heavens. I hope it's not some insanely powerful tribulation lightning. A concerned expression appeared on Enlin's face. Don't worry, little Ling's tribulation transcendence has always been very normal. A warm smile appeared on Su Xiaolan's face as she said, regardless of whether it's tribulation transcendence to the soul formation stage or the return to void stage, their tribulations are all very normal. For a supremely talented cultivator like her, their tribulations are just a formality. Enlin was a little taken aback upon hearing this. That can't be right. Isn't it supposed to be that the more supremely talented a cultivator is, the more abnormal their tribulations are? How could Yi Ling's tribulation lightning be simple? Enlin was perplexed. Su Xiaolan explained. Yi Ling is a freak among freaks, so her tribulation lightning is the most freakish among freaks. Her tribulation lightning is the most freakish among freaks, so her tribulation lightning is very simple. Enlin's mouth gaped open in astonishment at Su Xiaolan's explanation. That was an explanation? Negative makes positive? Was he really serious when he said those words with such a serious face? Right at this moment, a bolt of golden divine lightning tore through space before striking Yi Ling's head. Boom! Terrifying lightning might surged through Yi Ling's body. Yi Ling's brows relaxed, and she seemed to be feeling a little lazy. Enlin, boom, boom, boom. The tribulation transcendence had begun. One bolt of golden void lightning after another fell from the sky before striking Yi Ling's body with terrifying might. Yi Ling's aura continued to climb and become more powerful. Soon, all 49 bolts of golden void lightning had fallen. The tribulation clouds dissipated. Yi Ling opened her bright eyes, and she rose to her feet before stretching lazily. There was a faint blush on her cheeks, making her appear particularly beautiful and translucent. Master, I successfully transcended my tribulation. An elated smile appeared on her face. Enlin was completely dumbstruck as he stared at the woman before him. This is called tribulation transcendence? You call this tribulation transcendence? Enlin was struck by the unfairness of the heavens. This tribulation lightning wasn't even enough for him to warm up, so how could it be considered a tribulation transcendence for Yi Ling? However, this was a genuine tribulation lightning, and Yi Ling's cultivation base was indeed at the return to void intermediate stage. Furthermore, her aura was extremely fearsome, and she had most likely become significantly more powerful than before. How could this be? This didn't make sense, and Lin was struck by the urge to cry as he recalled his own tribulation transcendence experience. Su Xiaolan was used to this, and her expression didn't change in the slightest. However, in all honesty, witnessing Yi Ling's tribulation transcendence for the first time had given her a similar mental blow as Enlin. Master, Yi Ling called out softly as she stared at Enlin with her large, bright eyes. Enlin could see the expression of praise me in her eyes. F***CK. I still want you to comfort me. Little Ling is the best. Enlin offered words of praise. He thought to himself for a moment before adding, keep up the good work, and keep up the good work. A sweet smile appeared on Yi Ling's face. Thank you, Master. I'll be sure to keep up the good work. I'm going to prepare for my tribulation transcendence now. Unlin. Chapter 17:14. Wait, did I hear that right? What did you say? Unlin felt like he was hallucinating. I'm going to prepare for my tribulation transcendence to the return to void final stage. Yiling cocked her head to the side. What? Is there a problem? Unlin drew a sharp intake of breath. Of course there's a problem. You've only just progressed to the return to void intermediate stage, and you're already preparing for your tribulation transcendence to the return to void final stage? Su Xiaolan was also quite nervous. Little Ling, I know it's been a long time since you last progressed to the return to void intermediate stage, and you're already preparing for your tribulation transcendence to the return to void final stage. Don't forget what the old Taoist priest told you. And Lin's mouth gaped open again upon hearing Su Xiaolan's words. And Lin's mouth gaped open again upon hearing Su Xiaolan's words. Was it very painful to hold back her cultivation base? Yiling paused momentarily before finally nodding with a resigned expression. All right. She chose to continue to hold back her cultivation base and build a solid foundation in the end. That day, the 4-9 Immortal sect held another banquet to celebrate Yi Ling's successful breakthrough. Master Enlin cooked a delicious golden dragon flying fish dish for his disciple, and Yi Ling was full of praise for it with the help of the frying pan. Master Enlin cooked a delicious golden dragon flying fish for his disciple, and with the help of the frying pan, Yi Ling had tears of joy in her eyes as she praised the dish over and over again. The title of Heaven's God of Cooking was not just for show. Fanny sent a voice transmission to inform him that her father had agreed to refine a divine pill and was already in the process of doing so. And Lin also sent a voice transmission to the Grandmaster Construction Cultivator to ask her how she was doing and express his gratitude. However, no one picked up the call, indicating that she was still quite angry. And Lin also tried to contact the Grandmaster Construction Cultivator via voice transmission talisman to ask her about her recent situation and express his gratitude. However, no one picked up, so she was most likely still angry. Many of the arrogant living beings on the Tai Chu continent had been slapped in the face. Many of the arrogant living beings on the Tai Chu continent had been slapped in the face with a resounding slap. Emperor Ziwei sent a voice transmission to express his congratulations. Emperor Ziwei sent a voice transmission to express his congratulations. Zhu Shuza sent a voice transmission to express his congratulations. The victorious fighting Buddha sent a voice transmission talisman to congratulate him. Even Lan Xiaoni, who was far away in the West Sea, sent a voice transmission to congratulate him and chatted with Enlin on the phone for an hour. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Front had completely retreated, and the leader of the West Sea Alliance could finally relax for a while. Dongfang Zhuangshi also sent a voice transmission, but he wasn't there to congratulate them. Enlin, I really don't have a choice. I was wrong. I really was wrong. Time has been plunged into chaos, and you are a man who can create miracles. Please come take a look. Dongfang Zhuangshi's desperate and helpless voice sounded from the voice transmission talisman, and Lin was given a fright. He had never seen Dongfang Zhuangshi speak in such a tone, nor had he ever seen him beg someone like this. Things had definitely taken a turn for the worse. Xiaolan, I have to leave for a while. Dongfang Zhuangshi needs me. And Lin stood up. Go, but remember to do what you can. Su Xiaolan looked at Enlin and didn't stop him, but the concern in her eyes was quite apparent. And Lin kissed Su Xiaolan before tearing through space and flying directly toward Xiaoxian United University. Dongfang Zhuangshi had placed the vast land of blood in the sea of clouds not far away from the floating continent of the United of Cultivation and Cultivation, and he had never moved it away. And Lin quickly found that place. He used his divine inspection technique to break through the restriction and pass through a spatial gate on the floating continent. A rush of dizziness ensued. A peculiar world appeared before Lin's eyes again. This was a world that had been sealed by time. Bright and beautiful sunlight, swaying willows, birds flying in the trees, and pedestrians bustling along the streets. Everything was so beautiful, serene, and peaceful. Unfortunately, All of this had been frozen in time. Regardless of whether it was life forms or other matter, everything had been frozen. It was like a frame painting that Lin could only admire, but he couldn't do anything. Time had already been severed here. Lin followed his memory and passed through the crowd in an attempt to find that clinic. All of a sudden, the sky turned red. All of the pedestrians on the streets disappeared, and the beautiful scenery instantly changed to be replaced by countless mutilated bodies and blood flowing all over the ground. The entire city had become a desolate wasteland, and countless agonized corpses lay on the ground, silently recounting their sins. It was like a scene straight out of hell. Lin's expression shifted. Wasn't this the scene when the Black Hand tribe massacred the entire city? Could it be that the frozen time had failed? He quickly made his way forward, and the scenery before his eyes began to change again. The corpses on the ground quickly decayed, and countless insects emerged as bursts of black smoke permeated the streets. In the next instant, the rotting corpses on the ground disappeared, only to be replaced by white bones. And Lin was struck by an indescribable sense of dizziness. This place was a little strange. Could it be that the time Divine Tool's energy had been depleted? He finally saw the nearby clinic, and he was just about to enter it. The world around him changed again. The desolate city was restored to its original state. Countless pedestrians were chatting on the streets, and the shop assistants were either yelling or greeting customers with smiles on their faces. A little girl in a cream-colored dress was licking a candied haw as she looked into the clinic in silence. And Lin's heart jolted. This was the clinic. He was just about to walk in when his footsteps faltered as a strange feeling welled up in his heart. And Lin turned his gaze toward the little girl outside the door. The more he looked at her, the more familiar she became. All of a sudden, a thought exploded in his mind. Holy F***CK. This little girl was very similar to Dongfang Mingjie. Could it be that she was a child? If the girl outside the door was Dongfang Mingjie, then the one inside the clinic was, and Lin felt like things were not as simple as they seemed, and he took a deep breath before walking into the clinic. He was greeted by a familiar scene. There was an extremely beautiful woman in a cream-colored dress with a gentle smile on her face. She was filling up medicine, and she looked very pleasing to the eye. However, all of her movements were fixed, as if she were a beautiful painting. A middle-aged man was activating a white stone in his hand with all his might. Countless black threads appeared in the air around Dongfang Mingjie before slowly extending toward her, appearing particularly abrupt in this still world. Mr. Lin, you're finally here. Dongfang Zhuangshi spoke in a hoarse voice. What happened? And Lin discovered that Dongfang Zhuangshi was in a very bad state. To put it more accurately, Dongfang Zhuangshi was completely exhausted, as if his entire body had been emptied. Even so, he was still using all of his power to activate the white stone. I used the Time Light Stone to inject a huge amount of power of time into this city in an attempt to reverse the flow of time. But who would have thought that this world would retaliate against me? The time in this city has been plunged into chaos. If it weren't for the fact that Dongfang Mingjie is being protected by the chaotic life core, she would have been replaced by the little girl outside the door a long time ago. This world is rejecting Dongfang Mingjie, and I can't hold on much longer. Dongfang Zhuangshi's features were deathly pale, and he continued to activate the white stone in his hand. His power had been completely depleted, and he was burning his own blood essence as a source of energy. Lin's expression became grave as he looked at the black threads extending toward Dongfang Mingjie. He nodded. Then what should I do? How would I know? Save me and Lin. Dongfang Zhuangshi wailed helplessly. Lin. Chapter 17:15. Lin knew that he was the only one Dongfang Zhuangshi could rely on now. He was already Dongfang Zhuangshi's last straw to clutch at his final chance at life and death. However, Lin was also in despair. He was completely dumbstruck by this situation. He didn't even know what was going on, let alone how to save Dongfang Mingjie. Perhaps he would be able to figure something out if he had some time to do some research. However, what they lacked the most right now was time. If Dongfang Zhuangshi couldn't hold on any longer, the white stone would dim, and Dongfang Mingjie would be instantly destroyed by the black threads in the air. And Lin, please. Dongfang Zhuangshi gritted his teeth and burned his blood essence in a frenzy in an attempt to salvage the situation. However, his aura was becoming weaker and weaker, and the black threads were drawing closer and closer to the peaceful woman. And Lin took a deep breath, and his heart was filled with bitterness. Please, he had to at least give her a detailed direction. Otherwise, how was she supposed to know what to do? And Lin grumbled internally, but he was also trying his best to think of a way out of this predicament. He injected a huge amount of power of time into the city in an attempt to force the flow of time, only to create a chaotic flow of time. At the end of the day, this city was still unable to synchronize with the current time. However, the only thing that he was happy about was that time was no longer stationary. It was constantly jumping up and down, which meant that there was a possibility that it could flow normally. Just as Lin was contemplating this, he suddenly felt like something was different about Dongfang Mengjie, as if something had overlapped with something else. He looked through the curtains of the clinic and saw the bustling crowd outside. His pupils contracted drastically. This was the scene that had taken place after time had stopped. Time could return to its original state, but soon, the scene outside the clinic changed again, and it was no longer the same as before. However, Lin could already see hope. This city could return to its original state. If he could connect Dongfang Mengjie's true body to that period of time, then she wouldn't suffer any backlash. If he could connect that period of time to the absolute time of the real world, then he would be able to save her from her time predicament. Now that time was beating irregularly, how could he make it flow normally again? Wait, connected with absolute time? And Lin's eyes suddenly lit up. Mengjie, don't worry. Even if I die, I will die before you. I won't let you die alone. The energy within Dongfang Zhuangshi's body had already been completely depleted, and his blood essence was his last source of energy. The uncle's expression was clearly extremely dispirited, but as long as he looked at the woman in front of him, his eyes would shine brightly, as if he would never get tired of looking at her. Dongfang Zhuangshi, I have a way to save her. Hang in there. And Lin yelled. Dongfang Zhuangshi shuddered upon hearing this, and tears welled up in his eyes. Really? Fellow Taoist and Lin, is that true? It's true, so don't give up, and Lin said. Don't worry, I can definitely hold on. That's great, that's really great. The uncle, who had lived for countless years, couldn't help but tear up. He had already given up all hope, and he had already prepared himself to die along with Dongfang Mengjie. Who would have thought that Lin would really be able to turn the tables and give him hope of a new life? Time was still ticking erratically, and Lin's entire body was tense as he surveyed his surroundings. He had to pay attention to every change in time. Time passed by quickly. Dongfang Zhuangshi's entire body trembled, and he was on the brink of collapse. The blood essence within his body was also almost completely depleted, but he forced himself to not collapse at the thought of saving Dongfang Mengjie's life. And Lin was also very anxious, but time ticked erratically, and he didn't know when he would be able to return to the original point in time. He might be able to return to it in the next second, or he might never be able to return to it in the future. This was all up to luck. Sometimes, fate really wasn't something that living beings could comprehend. There were countless Tao, and there were also countless fates. With every snap of a finger in every instant, there were countless possibilities. And Lin didn't think too much about anything else, as he focused on observing the ticking of time. Finally, at a certain moment, that feeling appeared again. The Dongfang Mengjie before him suddenly overlapped with the world around her. There were people coming and going outside the medical clinic, and the sunlight shone through the window on her face, giving her a gentle, enchanting, and tranquil appearance. And Lin focused his gaze, and his aura instantly climbed to its peak. Golden ripples suddenly proliferated throughout the entire medical clinic before expanding infinitely, enshrouding the entire ancient city before everything came to a complete standstill. Spell technique of the heavenly Tao. Time stopped. In the next instant, the chaotic time that was constantly beating stopped beating. Everything came to a standstill aside from a man whose white robe continued to flutter gently. At that moment, Enlin had become the master of time in the ancient city. Everything fell silent aside from a single scene. He wielded the paramount power of laws, and the black threads that were trying to corrode Dongfang Mengjie instantly disappeared in that instant. That's right, this spell technique he had obtained from the River of Time was the key to breaking this deadlock. The time stop technique could stop the flow of time within a certain range. After time was stopped, the area that had been paused would reconnect with the absolute flow of time of the great Tao of heaven and earth. This was the special property of his spell technique, and it could be used in any situation. In essence, the flow of time in this ancient city was a misaligned flow. If Enlin used time stop on an area that was already misaligned, then after time was stopped, the flow of time in this ancient city would forcibly reconnect with the absolute flow of time of the great Tao of heaven and earth. In other words, when Enlin used time stop, he was actually making use of the spell technique's passive ability to reconnect with the absolute flow of time. 1 second later, sunlight shone through the window and spilled into the room, warming the entire space. A light breeze blew past, and the curtains of the medical clinic danced gently. Ding-ling-ling, ding-ling-ling. An extremely crisp and pleasant sound rang out from the wind chimes. Osmanthus cake for sale. Fresh osmanthus cake, 3 coins apiece. Mommy, I want to eat osmanthus cake. Osmanthus cake, my asterisk S, you useless child. Eat the candied haws in your hand first. A burst of laughter and chatter sounded from outside. A woman in a cream-colored dress was grabbing medicine, and her slender hands were very agile. However, her movements suddenly faltered, and she raised her head, upon which she was rooted to the spot. Her bright eyes reflected the image of a middle-aged man with Kirin horns. The middle-aged man had tears streaming down his face. What's wrong, Zhuangshi? Did you fail the Pill Tower exam? If you fail the exam, then so be it. Why are you crying like a grown man? The woman was a little exasperated as she raised her hand to slap this disappointing man in the face. Mengjie, Dongfang Zhuangshi wiped tears from his eyes. He was excited and a little dizzy. I think I'm a little anemic. The middle-aged man's head rang, and his eyes rolled over as he fainted. Chapter 17:16. The middle-aged man had been sobbing his heart out just a second ago, but now his eyes had rolled over into the back of his head, and he fell backward. Dongfang Mengjie was given a fright, and she instantly rushed over to the middle-aged man's side to steady him. What's wrong with your body? You're not anemic. You're almost out of blood. Dongfang Mengjie was given another fright upon inspecting Dongfang Zhuangshi's body. Dongfang Zhuangshi basked in her warm embrace and smelled her scent, and tears flowed from his eyes again. He couldn't help but rub his head against the woman's soft and warm body, upon which he rubbed against something soft and bouncy. Slap! A resounding slap reverberated throughout the clinic. You're already in this state, and you're still not serious? Dongfang Mengjie's face was flushed with rage. Dongfang Zhuangshi was moved to tears again as he experienced the scorching sensation of the slap. What a nostalgic feeling. This is real. All of this is real. He had waited for so long and dreamed of this countless times, but his biggest dream had finally come true. All right, stop crying and lie down. Dongfang Mengjie carried the middle-aged man to a hospital bed in the clinic before turning to Enlin with curiosity in her eyes. May I ask who you are? I am Dongfang Zhuangshi's friend, Enlin. Enlin smiled. This was the first time he had communicated with Dongfang Mengjie. He was already extremely familiar with Dongfang Mengjie in his dream, but he was communicating with her as a complete stranger in the real world. This was quite a peculiar feeling. Hello, Mr. Enlin. A warm smile appeared on Dongfang Mengjie's face upon hearing this. How did Dongfang Zhuangshi become like this? Enlin blinked upon hearing this. Isn't that obvious? Uncle was right in front of you, and he risked his life to burn his essence blood to save you. Enlin was contemplating whether he should tell the truth. Perhaps it would be more touching to hear the middle-aged man say it himself. Wait, this kind of thing should be told by someone else. That would make it seem more sincere. Dongfang Zhuangshi became like this because of you, Enlin said with a serious expression. Because of me? Dongfang Mengjie's eyes widened. Why? You've already died once. In order to save you, Dongfang Zhuangshi spent countless years and almost sacrificed his own life, and Lin continued. Dongfang Mengjie was astonished. Where did this idiot come from? She asked in shock. And Lin, it was no wonder that this woman would sigh with emotion. She had been gathering medicine here this entire time, and Dongfang Zhuangshi had only been gone for a few years. How many tens of thousands of years had passed? The power of time was still very difficult for her to understand. It was just like when you were suddenly eating and your brother suddenly ran over and told you that he had spent countless years and paid the price of his life to save you. You would also treat him as a fool. I'm sorry, I was rude, but you, fellow Taoist and Lin, are you really all right? Dongfang Mengjie stared at Enlin with her beautiful eyes, as if she was trying to determine from Enlin's expression whether he was mentally ill or not. Enlin heaved a forlorn sigh. Stay with Dongfang Zhuangshi for now. When he wakes up again, he'll explain everything to you. Dongfang Zhuangshi was currently unconscious due to anemia. Even though he wore a blissful smile on his face, his condition was indeed quite bad, and he still needed to be taken care of. Dongfang Mengjie bowed again to express her gratitude before taking care of Dongfang Zhuangshi. Enlin made his way out of the clinic again. He looked around at the bustling streets and the sounds of chatting and yelling reverberating in his ears. The aroma of alcohol wafting through the air was extremely appetizing. This city had finally come to life this time. Enlin raised his head and looked up at the sun in the sky. The fake sun was about to fade, so it was time to bring in a new sun from the outside world. Not long after that, some people tried to leave the city, only to find that they had been blocked by a massive enchantment barrier. The entire city was instantly on high alert, and everyone was in a state of panic. Alarm bells began to sound throughout the entire city. One powerful cultivator after another gathered to discuss countermeasures. Some people were in despair and bowed to the sky, begging the immortals to forgive them. This was a massive enchantment barrier that enshrouded the entire city, and it had to have been set up by an extremely powerful, mighty figure. The cultivators in the city had no chance to resist, and their lives were in the hands of the immortals, so it was no wonder that some of the cultivators were so terrified. Not long after, a golden-robed man with a powerful aura flew to the center of the city. He bowed respectfully toward the sky and said with a voice as loud as a bell, "This humble servant is City Lord Chun Dian. May I ask why Senior has set up a barrier here? We will do everything in our power to assist you, so please be magnanimous." Enlin faltered slightly upon hearing this. The senior they were talking about was still hugging Dongfang Mengjie and sobbing, so he didn't have time to deal with them. However, this enchantment barrier seemed to have given all the cultivators in the city quite a fright. Cultivators were all extremely fearful of unknown powers, so it was understandable that they would react in this manner. Enlin hesitated momentarily before deciding not to reveal himself to explain himself. If he wanted to scare them, then so be it. They would definitely calm down after a while. The sky was deathly silent. The senior didn't say anything, and Chun Dian's eyes were filled with despair. It looked like this was a senior who viewed all living beings as mere ants. Countless cultivators instantly wore dejected expressions, as if they were about to be struck by a great calamity. Some of them were even hugging their family and friends as they bade farewell. And Lin was quite amused by the sight of all of the living beings. A few hours later, Dongfang Zhuangshi woke up, and he recounted everything that had happened during the past few years to Dongfang Mengjie. Dongfang Mengjie listened to his story, and it had already completely exceeded her imagination. She felt as if she were listening to a bizarre story, and she interrupted Dongfang Zhuangshi on several occasions to make sure that he wasn't retarded. Dongfang Zhuangshi dragged Dongfang Mengjie out of the enchantment barrier. After exiting the ancient city, Dongfang Mengjie discovered that she was situated in the clouds. The setting sun before her had dyed the clouds red, and she could see an extremely vibrant and spectacular sea of clouds. This ancient city was actually situated on a floating continent. Is my city really in the sky? Dongfang Mengjie murmured to herself. It has been in the sky for a long time, Dongfang Zhuangshi replied. Has tens of thousands of years really passed? Dongfang Mengji asked. Dongfang Zhuangshi nodded with an earnest expression. That's right. This world has changed a lot. I've been silently gathering medicine here, and tens of thousands of years have passed in the blink of an eye. Dongfang Mengjie still felt like this was all very surreal. This was probably the most bizarre transmigration experience in history. Tens of thousands of years had passed in the blink of an eye, and she felt as if she had been separated from the outside world. Lin was also quite emotional. It was a very interesting experience to have his own time stagger with the time of the outside world. Dongfang Zhuangshi and Dongfang Mengjie extended solemn bows to express their gratitude to Enlin. If it weren't for Enlin, Dongfang Mengjie would already be dead. Enlin felt a lot more at ease as he looked at the two of them. He had finally done something good, and it felt so good. Enlin waved a sleeve and bade farewell to the two of them before returning to the 4-9 Immortal Sect. Chapter 17:17. The enchantment barrier around the ancient city was suddenly opened. All of the panicking cultivators in the city finally relaxed. They celebrated with elation and bowed to the invisible senior in the sky before making their way out of the city, upon which they were all dumbstruck. Holy F***CK! What is this place? City Lord Chun Dian stared blankly at the scenery outside the city. My city is in the sky. Before his eyes was a boundless sea of clouds. His city was above the sea of clouds. A cool breeze blew past, and Chun Dian shuddered involuntarily, but it also helped to clear his mind. Could it be that Senior tossed our city into the sky? That's very likely. But why would he do that? What kind of vendetta does he have against us? Chun Dian was on the verge of tears. As the city lord, he was responsible for the safety of the entire city, but he was struck by a deep sense of helplessness and despair. He didn't know what to do anymore. The scenery before his eyes was very beautiful. The clouds in the distance were as vibrant as the sea. However, Chun Dian didn't have any desire to enjoy the scenery. Right at this moment, two people appeared before him. The man was very unfamiliar, and he had a very strange horn on his head. The woman was very familiar. She was the #1 beauty in their city, as well as a top-rate doctor. City Lord Chun. The middle-aged man extended a slight salute. Hello? May I ask who you are? A cautious expression appeared on Chun Dian's face. The middle-aged man pulled out a map. Chun Dian was a little depressed. He wasn't in the mood to look at maps. The middle-aged man smiled. Where in the Kingdom of the 9 States do you want this city to land? I can make it a perfect home. Chun Dian. At the 4-9 Immortal Sect, Enlin returned to his residence. Enlin is Dongfang Zhuangshi, all right? Su Xiaolan asked with a tense expression. A smug smile appeared on Enlin's face. Your Dao partner is here, so there's nothing you can't do. Su Xiaolan rolled her eyes at Enlin. Yes, yes, yes. Enlin is the best. Does that mean Big Sister Dongfang was saved? Yiling also made her way over to Enlin with an excited expression. She had heard about Dongfang Zhuangshi and Dongfang Mengjie from Su Xiaolan, and she had a very deep impression of this pair of lovers who had been separated by time and death. It's okay. I'll take you to see her another day, Enlin said with a smile. After taking care of Dongfang Zhuangshi, Enlin was in a very good mood. It was as if another obsession had been resolved, and he was feeling very refreshed. Fighting? I'm super strong. It was a voice message from the distant Western paradise. The battling Buddha sought out Enlin for another battle. Ever since the Celestial Clan became a coward, this #1 Monkey King under the heavens had nothing better to do. After witnessing Enlin's imposing and tyrannical figure, he thought about arranging a fight with him every day. However, Enlin was not that easy to make an appointment with. Boys had to protect themselves when they were outside. They couldn't just go to everyone's invitation. They had to be more reserved and wait to see if the other party was sincere. In the 4-9 Immortal Sect, all he had to do was play with Little Gu, walk by, beat up Little Huang, and enjoy Yi Ling and Su Xiaolan's intimate massages. Why did he have to travel all the way to the Buddhist kingdom to fight? Did he have nothing better to do? and Lin sent a voice message to the battling Buddha. Maybe another day. Thus, their leisurely life continued. And Lin handed the vermilion bird mirror to Emperor Ziwei in hopes that he could repair the mirror. The mirror had been unable to withstand heavenly goddess Lin Yu's karmic attack for Enlin, and it had shattered. Xiao Ke was fine, but the mirror was the equivalent of her face. Now that her face had been disfigured, Enlin naturally had to do everything in his power to help her recover. Tell Emperor Ziwei that he has to repair her no matter what price he has to pay. Money is not an issue. And Lin handed the vermilion bird mirror to little Tian with a solemn expression. Yes, master. Shui Zhantian immediately tore open a spatial rift and hurried toward the celestial court. Little Xie spoke in an indifferent voice. Who would have thought that you would be so loyal to an artifact spirit? And Lin was speechless. Isn't this what I should do? Am I that bad in your eyes? No. Little Xie wagged a finger. You are even worse in my eyes than you can imagine. And Lin immediately injected a few bursts of divine weapon origin energy into little Xie's body, upon which she moaned in agony. Sometimes, it was better to prove one's worth with actions than words. Sure enough, after feeding little Xie didn't say anything bad about him anymore. And Lin also summoned Xiao Fu and fed her in the same manner. All of these lowly artifact spirits were very honest and righteous, and they quickly submitted to Enlin's divine weapon origin energy. After that was the little fatso. He fed them one by one until he was completely exhausted and he panted heavily under the sun. Big brother, and drink this bottle of kidney treasure, woof. Dabai ran over with a bottle of spirit liquid in his mouth. 1 bottle to refresh the mind, 2 bottles to make you never tired, and 3 bottles to make you live forever. And Lin rolled his eyes before taking a sip of the spirit liquid. A refreshing feeling washed through his entire body, and energy surged through his body. After drinking, he looked at the vast expanse of Moon Lake before him, and he was struck by a sense of contentment and contentment. Su Xiaolan was also sipping fruit juice off to the side. Boom, boom, boom. A series of earth-shattering pillars of water suddenly erupted from the surface of the lake. Xianyuan Cheng stood tall and straight on the surface of the lake with his eyes tightly closed. The water around him surged relentlessly before exploding violently with an extremely explosive power. He was trying to make the water self-detonate, and it looked like he was already halfway to success. Xianyuan Cheng's #1 diehard fan, Xu Honglan, clapped her hands excitedly with a scorching light in her eyes. It was as if Big Brother Cheng was at his most alluring at a time like this. And Lin was a little curious. How much longer were these two psychos going to wait before they confirmed their relationship? And what was going to happen to them? Sect leader and Lin, I have urgent news. A disciple hurried over from afar atop his sword. And Lin's heart jolted upon hearing this. Under normal circumstances, the elders would usually be the ones to report to the sect leader. Could it be that the heavenly human tribe was about to launch a large-scale attack? He accepted the disciple's report, upon which was a massive map of the southern region of the Taichu continent, with 3 massive spatial holes marked out on the map. There was a particularly eye-catching passage. The soul power tide on the Taichu continent has reached its peak, and 3 spatial holes have appeared in the southern region of the continent, which can lead to the spirit realm where the spirit patriarch resides. Currently, a large number of void spirit tribe powerful beings have entered the spirit realm to search for opportunities, including the most powerful beings of the void spirit tribe, the god-engulfing skeleton and Ember. And Lin finally understood why this piece of information was so important. Su Xiaolan's pupils also contracted slightly upon seeing this. A conflicted expression appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. And Lin said, "Let's go, Xiaolan. Let's go take revenge." Chapter 17:18. The spirit realm was the holy land of the void spirit tribe. Its significance was equivalent to the holy land of the vampires. The only difference was that only the holy disciples had the right to enter the holy land of the blood tribe, while the spirit realm was open to the entire Taichu continent. This was because there were no ancient restrictions blocking its entrance, and the location of the spatial holes was random. Even the Void Spirit Tribe Dao integration stage, super mighty figures were unable to pinpoint the exact location of the next opening, so there was no need for them to know in advance. All three of them were located in the southern region of the Tai Chu continent. One was in the Void Spirit realm of the Void Spirit Tribe. One was in the Divine Lake realm, and one was in the White Frost Forest near the Creation realm. Every time the spiritual realm opened, countless living beings would enter in search of fortuitous opportunities. Not only would the Void Spirit Tribe be entering, but all of the other living beings on this continent would also be entering. Not only was it the holy land of the Void Spirit Tribe, but it was also an inseparable part of the Tai Chu continent. The property of the spirit realm was the common property of all living beings on the Tai Chu continent. Well, that's what all the foreign races who went in to fight for treasures and opportunities said. And Lin also felt that it made sense. Hearing that Lin was so determined to take revenge, Su Xiaolan's heart was touched. And Lin, although any living being can enter the spirit realm, there are still many dangers. Su Xiaolan still wore a hesitant expression. The god engulfing skeleton and Ember had both entered the spirit realm and entered a world that even they were unable to control. Objectively speaking, this was indeed a good opportunity for them to exact their revenge. However, the Void Spirit Tribe attached great importance to the spirit realm. Countless Void Spirit Tribe powerful beings and mighty figures were going to gather in the spirit realm, and that place was still a dangerous place. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Ember and the god engulfing skeleton have both gone in, so we can take care of them all at once. And Lin, on the other hand, didn't look afraid at all. It said that at the peak of the soul power tide, one can only enter and not leave the spiritual realm after it opens. Only when the soul power tide recedes can one leave. And this period of time is a full 20 days, which will cut off their escape route. This is a rare opportunity. Under Lin's insistence, Su Xiaolan finally decided to head to the spiritual realm. Now that she had the ability to take revenge, she didn't want to drag it on any longer. Su Xiaolan drew her sword. Last time you black spirit snake, and I surrounded the god engulfing skeleton, but it still managed to escape. This time, I Long Aolon am going to slay both the god engulfing skeleton and Ember. And Lin also drew his sword and said, I, Long Aolon, am willing to follow Long Aolon and kill all of her enemies to carve out a bright path. The two of them smiled at each other and began to discuss the specifics of the operation. In order to make the mission more stable, they decided to call for some reinforcements. He definitely couldn't summon all of the powerful beings stationed in the Kingdom of the Nine States, but he could summon Little Huan. Aside from that, Lin also contacted Black Spirit Snake via voice transmission talisman to ask if she was interested in the spirit realm. Black Spirit Snake's reply was very straightforward. Don't look for me if you're not fighting the heavenly human tribe. And Lin hung up the voice transmission sulkily. Not long after that, his phone suddenly rang again. Senior and Lin, I'll go. White Spirit Snake's excited voice sounded, and Black Spirit Snake's enraged roars of calm down, little by, and have you been possessed, could also be heard over the voice transmission talisman. And Lin faltered upon hearing this, and he turned to Su Xiaolan with a concerned expression. Su Xiaolan pursed her lips in a magnanimous smile and nodded. Thus, White Spirit Snake was added to the Spirit Realm team. And Lin, Su Xiaolan, Little Huang, and White Spirit Snake. With this team, they had a much better chance of killing the god engulfing skeleton and Ember. However, just as Lin was about to set off, his voice transmission talisman lit up again. Brother and Lin, want to meet up in the spirit realm? The battling Buddha's voice sounded. And Lin's eyes lit up. Yes. Come on, let's go fight the Void Spirit Tribe. Haha, that's great. Your big brother's son hasn't had a fight recently, so this is a good time to go to the spirit realm and beat up the Void Spirit Tribe. The battling Buddha's voice sounded again. And Lin spoke with a serious expression. For the sake of the Kingdom of the Nine States, for the sake of the human race, and for the sake of the entire continent, We can't allow these evil beings to wreak havoc. We are here to uphold justice and make sure that the light of justice shines upon the entire continent. Crack. The voice transmission talisman was cut off. In the distance, the Monkey King scratched his ear. Why are you suddenly as long-winded as my master? Wait, I forgot to ask him where we're meeting up. In the northern region of the Spirit Lake realm. Glacial Lake. There was a gargantuan blue spatial hole on the surface of the lake, which was emanating bursts of frosty air. It spun relentlessly like a vortex, sucking in vital energy and soul power from the continent, while unleashing an extremely powerful spatial power. This was one of the 3 entrances to the Tai Chu continent's spirit realm. All of the powerful beings from the spirit realm had already entered the blue spatial hole. They weren't here to kill enemies. Instead, they were here to fight for treasures and inheritances. The spirit realm was actually an ancient battlefield that was once ruled over by the spirit patriarch. It was also the place where the spirit patriarch had fallen in battle. That place was vast and boundless, and there were countless precious remains, strange plants, lost artifacts, and even lost inheritances. If it weren't for the fact that the living beings within the spirit realm would be corroded by the heavenly Tao's destructive power, they wouldn't even want to leave this precious realm. And Lin and Su Xiaolan rode on the phoenix and soon arrived at the entrance to the Spirit Lake realm. My God, is that a phoenix? It's a phoenix from the 4-9 immortal sect. All of the powerful beings gathered at the glacial lake were extremely excited, and some of them even bowed slightly. However, they were suppressed by the phoenix's bloodline, and they instinctively chose to bow in submission. Look, that's sect leader Lin, and the divine phoenix maiden. And Lin's reputation was like the sun in the sky now, and all of the powerful beings gathered at the glacial lake instantly erupted into a frenzy. Countless powerful beings stared at the man on the phoenix with scorching reverence and fanaticism in their eyes. This was a legendary man. War God Lin has come to the spirit realm. It looks like the Void Spirit Tribe is going to suffer. The spirit realm is going to be rocked by a storm. We can't get too close to Lin. All of the powerful beings were instinctively struck by a sense of fear as they recalled Lin's battles. They were clearly worried that Lin's battles would be too large and cause them to become collateral damage. Senior Lin, an excited voice sounded. Atop the phoenix, Lin was greeted by the sight of White Spirit Snake waving excitedly at him. Beside White Spirit Snake was a disgruntled Black Spirit Snake. Lin was suddenly very excited. Was this a one-for-one deal? Lin, Her Majesty Nuwa, will punish you if you lead little by a stray like this. Black Spirit Snake gritted her teeth as she glowered at Lin. Black Spirit Snake had already fallen into despair, and she could only bring up Her Majesty Nuwa. This is a cultivator's business, so how can you say that I'm leading them astray? Lin spoke with a righteous expression. I'm doing this for the human race and for the continent. I'm going to eradicate the enemies of the Anti-Continent Alliance. The veins on Black Spirit Snake's forehead bulged as she repressed her sword with all her might. Senior Lin, let's go in. White Spirit Snake made her way over to Lin with an elated expression. Let's wait a bit longer. There's still one more person who hasn't arrived, Lin said. Who is it? White Spirit Snake was curious. The one who's the best at fighting in the Buddhist kingdom. Lin smiled. Chapter 17:19. White Spirit Snake and Black Spirit Snake immediately knew who Lin was. The one who fought the best was naturally Monkey. Although the victorious fighting Buddha was no match for Shakyamuni, he was the fiercest and most ferocious fighter, so he was publicly acknowledged as the #1 fighting Buddha in the Buddhist kingdom. Birds of a feather really do flock together. Black Spirit Snake pursed her lips, and Lin replied with a serious expression, eradicating the Void Spirit Tribe is a good thing. We're all fighting for the peace and stability of the continent. Senior Lin, who are we going to fight after entering? White Spirit Snake asked curiously. I have a vendetta against the god engulfing skeleton and ember, and Lin said with a serious expression. A cold smile appeared on Black Spirit Snake's face. As expected, You're just abusing your position to exact revenge. All right, I definitely won't hold back when I see them. White Spirit Snake wore an enraged expression, as if she had a common enemy. Black Spirit Snake's heart ached even more upon seeing White Spirit Snake's current state. Not long after, he saw a white cloud flying over from afar. In an instant, Buddhist light filled the sky and the sound of Sanskrit rang out. A majestic monkey king clad in armor descended from the sky. Fellow Taoist and Lin, I, old son, am here. Rumble. The golden light smashed into the frozen ocean lake and set off huge waves. This extravagance is really impressive. Lin clicked his tongue in wonder. Now that the team was finally assembled, it was time to enter the spiritual world. Black Spirit Snake explained, after entering the spirit realm, we'll randomly descend at various places in the spirit realm. There are 3 exits, which are indicated by the colors in the sky. These are the purple sky extreme, the red sky extreme, and the white sky extreme. The Void Spirit tribe usually exits from the purple sky extreme, while we exit from the red sky extreme. All right, then let's leave. We'll also leave from the red pole. And Lin nodded. How should we meet and find each other? Su Xiaolan asked again. This was indeed a conundrum. All of them had landed in the spirit realm at random. Were they supposed to meet at the exit before attacking the Void Spirit tribe? In that case, there might not be enough time to go back and forth. As for landmark buildings, sorry, the spirit world was boundless. Every time the spirit world opened up a region, it was only a random region. It was very likely that it was an unexplored region, so it was impossible to know what kind of buildings there were. This is simple. The battling Buddha chortled with glee. I'll be fighting as soon as I go in, and I'll be there wherever the commotion is the loudest. You can just follow the direction of the commotion. Everyone was shocked. Fighting wherever he went. Was this monkey trying to overturn the entire spiritual realm? This method was very simple, but it was indeed very effective. Just like that, everyone hit it off and decided to use this method. Lin and the others began to fly toward the blue hole and plunged into the dark vortex. He felt as if the world was spinning, and Lin sensed an extremely terrifying wave of spatial force. It was boundless and ancient, vast and boundless, not something any creature could resist. The dizziness made his vision go dark. When he opened his eyes again, heaven and earth had changed. The earth was a multitude of colors, and there were all types of strange plants that he couldn't name growing proudly on the ground. All of them had one thing in common, and that was that they were extremely vibrant and beautiful, as if they were all seductive and seductive, seducing all living beings in their path. And Lin looked up into the sky to find that the sky was also very special. It was like a kaleidoscope that was extremely vibrant and vibrant, giving one the feeling that it was an abstract painting created by an artist. However, there were 6 extremely dazzling colors at the end of the sky. Red, black, white, purple, green, and gold. That should be the heavenly pole. There are 6 different directions, and 3 of them are exits. What are the other 3? Apparently, some of them are terrifying places that can kill even Tao integration stage super mighty figures. Some of them are ancient ruins, and some of them are unknown battlefields. All of them appear randomly. And Lin murmured to himself. Right at this moment, the ground suddenly began to tremor. And Lin's brows furrowed slightly as he looked down. At this moment, countless venomous fangs suddenly erupted from the ground within a radius of 100 meters before converging toward the center. The ground that Lin was standing on began to cave in and crack. There was a gargantuan mouth riddled with venomous fangs beneath the ground. How? The colorful venomous fangs closed their cavernous mouths and bit down toward Lin. Sigh. And Lin heaved a faint sigh as he stepped forward, and his aura condensed into a substantial aura that proliferated outward. Bam! The venomous fangs exploded on the spot, and blood and flesh rained down from the sky. And Lin didn't even use a spell technique. Instead, he used his aura to crush the venomous fangs. He paused momentarily before turning toward a certain spot of light in the distance. A faint smile appeared on his face as he walked toward that direction. At this moment, within the realm of red light. The god-engulfing skeleton was immersed in a pool of blood, and countless colorful souls hovered in the air around it, wailing in agony and anguish. If a normal living being were to encounter such an environment, they would definitely be driven insane. However, this big-headed skeleton was swaying its head from side to side, as if it were listening to the most beautiful celestial music. It then began to hum lightly, as if it were completely immersed in this peculiar environment. A pitch-black two-headed monster was next to the big-headed skeleton, gulping down the blood in the blood pool. Its two small eyes were squinted in satisfaction. The soul power and blood essence here is so wonderful. If it weren't for the fact that the effects would vanish as soon as we leave this place, I would definitely take all of the blood essence in this pool with me. Hee, don't be in such a hurry, Brother Earth Abyss. At our rate of absorption, we should be able to absorb all of the essence in this pool in 3 days. The god-engulfing skeleton narrowed its eyes with an expression of bliss. At this moment, a blue bird-like ghost hurtled toward them from afar. Urgent report. God-engulfing Emperor, urgent report. The blue bird landed beside the god-engulfing skeleton and yelled. Roar! What the hell is going on? Why are you making such a ruckus? If it's not something valuable, I'm going to swallow you. The two-headed ghost roared. The blue bird's body trembled slightly. According to the nine-eyed soul sacrifice, Enlin of the 4-9 immortal sect has already entered the soul realm. The two-headed ghost and the big-headed skeleton's expressions both shifted slightly upon hearing this. Who's with him? The two-headed ghost asked. I don't know. The bird shook its head. However, he's alone at the moment. The nine-eyed soul sacrifice only discovered Enlin because he just so happened to enter its territory. The two-headed ghost turned toward the god-engulfing skeleton, as if it was asking for instructions on what to do next. Enlin's recent performance on the Tai Chu continent was simply too astonishing. To his enemies, he was a nightmare, and all of the Void Spirit Tribe living beings' expressions changed drastically. Ha! The god-engulfing skeleton suddenly burst into laughter as battle intent erupted from its body. Perfect timing. Do you really think this is the kingdom of the 9 states? This is the spirit realm, and it's our territory. Enlin has become so arrogant and condescending just because he's made some achievements. He's looking down on all the heroes of this world. I'll make him regret coming here. This time, I'll make sure he won't be able to return. Chapter 17:20. The god-engulfing skeleton's bold words jolted the twin-headed monster and the blue bird spirit upon hearing this. You're right, big brother god-engulfing. To think that this brat would dare to trespass on our Void Spirit Tribe territory. It looks like he doesn't know how terrifying our Void Spirit Tribe is. The two-headed monster cackled. The god-engulfing skeleton harumphed coldly. Last time, the 3 of them attacked me, and I had to make a tactical retreat. Does he really think he's a match for me? He might be able to take on heavenly gods, but in terms of battle prowess, he can only kneel down and call me daddy. Well said, big brother god engulfing skeleton. The twin-headed monster nodded. But there are rumors that Enlin is already at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. The bluebird spirit was a little hesitant. The god-engulfing skeleton chuckled coldly. I've fought Enlin before, and I know his true power. He's at the Tao integration intermediate stage at most. As for the rumors about Enlin's strength in the outside world, they were all just exaggerations that were necessary for the sake of the war. I'm confident that I can slay Enlin under my feet. It was a super mighty figure at the Tao integration pinnacle stage, one of the most powerful beings in the Void Spirit realm. Why would it be afraid of Enlin? Especially since this was the Spirit realm, which was the territory of the Void Spirit Tribe. Even though it didn't have any traps set up here, the Spirit realm was extremely rich in soul power, making it a perfect battlefield for the Void Spirit Tribe. What do we do now? The twin-headed monster's eyes lit up. It had clearly come up with a plan. Let's CK him up and make him kneel before me and beg for mercy, the god-engulfing skeleton said in a cold voice. It had fled in a sorry state and even sacrificed a divine tool. This was a massive humiliation and a massive loss. Now that such a great opportunity for revenge was right before its eyes, how could it pass up this opportunity? All right, let's F***CK him up together. The twin-headed monster agreed with a sinister smile. It was a new Tao integration stage, super mighty figure, and following in the footsteps of its big brother would be extremely beneficial to its growth and fame if it could trample the most powerful being on the Tai Chu continent underfoot. One had to know that Enlin was a werewolf who had broken through 2 heavenly gates in a row. If they could defeat him, even if it was a group fight, it would be worth bragging about for a lifetime. Meanwhile, in a certain place in the spiritual realm where thousands of ghosts were wailing, Enlin walked forward step by step, curiously sizing up this place. Woo woo woo, hiss hiss, an eerie and cold voice lingered in his ears. Occasionally, there would be mournful cries. The ear-piercing sound of fingernails scratching the blackboard seemed to penetrate deep into one's bones. This place was very unfriendly, but Enlin was especially interested in it. That was because there was an extremely huge wreckage in front of him, over 100 li in size. What was the concept of 100 miles? This meant that the wreckage was as big as a large city. It had the appearance of a butterfly, but its wings were illusory, and there were countless struggling and twisting heads on its wings. There were probably tens of millions of different heads of different colors, and they were densely packed together. It was very dizzying to look at. Is this a dead spirit body? Generally speaking, after a spirit body dies, it will completely disappear from the world in the form of energy. However, this butterfly is different. After its death, its spirit body did not dissipate, and it became a dead spirit body with no signs of life. Enlin looked at the extremely spectacular corpse with amazement in his eyes. This thing is definitely a good treasure. I have to get it. Enlin took a deep breath, and there was a scorching light in his eyes. He planned to put it into his supreme-grade storage ring first before studying it in detail. However, he had only taken 2 steps when a crisp ding-dong sound suddenly sounded in his mind. Enlin's body trembled. This was the sound of the system. F***CK. Is the system going to come out and screw me again? Who's going to restrain this system? Don't let it come out and bite me. Enlin's eyes immediately turned red. He was still traumatized by the scorching sun, and now it had come out to wreak havoc again. Couldn't it just stop? The system had already become synonymous with screwing people over. If possible, Enlin really didn't want it to come out again. Couldn't it just let him take his revenge? Enlin turned his gaze toward the system. Detected that host is close to the demigod's body. Now assigning the following special mission. Absorb all the soul essence of the demigod's body within an hour. Mission success. God cultivation method to the 3rd stage. Mission failure. Host is an idiot. Note, after successfully absorbing the demigod's body, the host's consciousness will fall into a deep slumber. The body's self-protection mechanism will be triggered, and 60% of the host cultivation will be sealed for a day. This, Enlin's eyes widened, and his mind went blank. He ignored all of the contents of the system, and his gaze rested on the words, Host is an idiot. Host is an idiot. Host is an idiot. Host is an idiot. The system did not speak, but he felt as if he could hear its words reverberating in his ears. F***CK. The system is scolding me. Not only did it issue a mission, but it's also scolding me during the mission. What is this? What is this? Revenge. Revealing the truth? Enlin was so angry that his chest felt stuffy, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. If I, Enlin, die, I'll either die because of the system, or because I'll be angered to death by the system. Enlin gave the system an eye for an eye, and he scolded all 18 generations of the system's ancestors. He even scolded Doubtful Luya. After his anger subsided, he turned his gaze to the system's mission. The demigod's body that the system mentioned should be the giant butterfly-like spiritual body in front of him. As for what a demigod was, Enlin did not really understand, but he had a few guesses in his mind. The mission looks very simple. All I have to do is walk over and absorb all the soul essence of the body. So, if I fail the mission, the system will scold the host for being an idiot? That's a reasonable explanation, but isn't this the system taking the opportunity to scold me for being an idiot? Or maybe the system's host is an idiot is not a description, but a verb. It means that if the mission fails, and Lin will become an idiot. This is also very likely. So, what the hell is the system trying to do? The more Lin thought about it, the angrier he got. Forget it. I won't think about it anymore. I'll just do it. The time limit is only an hour. I have to hurry. Actually, although this mission is not difficult, there's still a risk. The risk is that my spirit will fall into a deep sleep for a day, and my cultivation will be sealed by 60%. In this dangerous spiritual realm, this is a very dangerous thing, and can be said to be the biggest pitfall of this mission. But it should be fine. I just need to hide for a day. Moreover, even if my cultivation is sealed by 60%, most of the living beings in this world are no match for me. Lin comforted himself and continued to approach the demigod's body. Chapter 17:21. 150 kilometers away from Lin, there was a pitch-black, ghostly figure crawling on the ground as it crawled forward. No matter how far Lin advanced, it followed him in silence, and no one noticed it at all. In fact, when it passed by Lin, it accidentally bumped into a ghost. That ghost flew into a rage and looked around, but it still didn't notice Lin. It was the most powerful scout in the Void Spirit realm, and its cultivation base was only at the return to Void stage. However, it was able to track a Dao integration stage super mighty figure, and all of this was due to its ability to conceal its aura as well as its super eyesight. That's right, it was the renowned nine-eyed ghost of the Void Spirit realm. So what if you're powerful, Lin? I can see everything you're doing. When the god engulfing skeleton gets here, it'll be the time of your death, and I'll be able to make a name for myself. In fact, I might even get a chance to bite your consciousness. A disdainful expression appeared on the nine-eyed ghost priest's face. It despised arrogant people the most. They even dared to set foot in the Void Spirit tribe's territory. One arrogant fool. And Lin had already made his way toward the demigod's body, and his footsteps suddenly faltered as he slowly pulled out his evil-slaying sword. The nine-eyed ghost's expression shifted slightly. Was he planning to dissect the body and store it in his storage ring? This body looked quite extraordinary, so it had to be quite valuable, right? It was a pity that no matter what he did, he would only be helping the god engulfing skeleton. The nine-eyed ghost's 9 big eyes widened as it stared at Lin in the distance, and a mocking smile appeared on its face again. The more happy Lin was now, the more despair he would feel when he was surrounded by the god engulfing skeleton. I'm really looking forward to this. Right at this moment, its field of vision suddenly plunged into a vast expanse of darkness. What's going on? The nine-eyed ghost was given a fright. Had it gone blind? Impossible. How could all 9 of its eyes go blind at the same time? In that instant, boundless chills ran through its body as a terrifying thought occurred to it. Could it be that it had been discovered? Second technique, Shadow Tiger. A light sentence rang in his ears. When the nine-eyed ghost regained its vision, the white-robed man was already standing in front of it. The black smoke-like sword chi around the pitch-black sword in his hand had already dissipated. Impossible. Impossible. I hid myself so well. How could I have been discovered? The nine-eyed sacrificial ghost's voice was getting weaker and weaker. A return to Void stage piece of trash dares to follow me? Do you really think that I, and Lin, can't even lift my saber? And Lin couldn't help but burst into laughter. The nine-eyed ghost. At this moment, it finally understood that Papa Ba was still Papa Ba. Even though Lin was currently in the territory of the Void Spirit tribe, he was still in existence that it could not afford to provoke Poochie. The pitch-black body on the ground suddenly split into pieces. The 9 large eyes directly split open and then shattered. Ah! The nine-eyed ghost shrieked as it was reduced to ashes. The number 1 scout of the Void Spirit tribe was insta-killed by Lin just like that. And Lin shook his head as if he had done something completely insignificant. He then sheathed his sword and made his way toward the demigod's body. My whereabouts have most likely been discovered. It's time to hurry up. The nine-eyed ghost was actually not bad. And Lin really hadn't discovered it before this. Prior to absorbing the demigod's soul power essence, and Lin had used his omniscient eye to survey his surroundings in an attempt to eliminate any potential threats. The main reason for that was to see if there were any traps or ambushes around, upon which the nine-eyed ghost's tragic demise. But when I take a closer look, this demigod is really huge. And Lin looked up at the massive body before him. He really didn't know if he could finish absorbing the demigod's soul power within an hour. Would his body be able to handle it? For some reason, he thought back to that time when he had eaten his son. His body couldn't handle it, but his sea of vital energy could. The system wouldn't issue missions that were truly unsolvable. If you thought the mission was unsolvable, then that was only because you hadn't found the right path. Forget it. I'll just take it one step at a time. There's always a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. And Lin cast aside all distracting thoughts and quickly made his way toward the demigod's body. Using spatial bending, he was able to travel 5 kilometers with a single step. Very soon, he was within 50 kilometers of the demigod's body. It was also at this moment that a very peculiar feeling enveloped his entire body. His divine soul suddenly felt very comfortable, as if there was a hand constantly massaging his divine soul, making his entire divine soul feel very comfortable, very high. How could this be? And Lin's entire body trembled. An extreme sense of satisfaction made him feel as if his body and mind had flown into the highest heavens. He knew that this kind of power would only bring more harm than good. He wanted to use his power to resist this unknown power, but this power was formless and traceless, as if this world was supposed to be like this. And Lin continued onward, but the further he went, the more exhilarated his consciousness became, and the more irrepressible it became. No, if this continues, He advanced another few dozen kilometers, and his legs were already trembling and turning to jelly. His face was also flushed, and Lin swore that he had never felt so good in his entire life. Even when flexing, he had never experienced such a feeling of satisfaction that reached straight into his soul. What kind of power is this? What kind of power is this? And Lin's eyes gradually became glazed over, and his vision began to blur as he looked at the gargantuan, colorful corpse in the distance. He had an urge to stay here forever. He wanted to stay here forever and enjoy this feeling forever. This was a feeling of satisfaction that reached straight into his soul, and he felt as if his entire body was floating. Not only did his legs turn to jelly, but his entire body had also turned to jelly, and he felt as if he were about to completely collapse into a world of warmth and tenderness. No, I have to persevere. And Lin bit down on the tip of his tongue in an attempt to use the pain to dispel this feeling of satisfaction. As a result, he was struck by a peculiar feeling that was both painful and satisfying at the same time. And Lin gritted his teeth and advanced another 5 kilometers. He was still around 5 kilometers away from the demigod's body. If he used a spatial bending spell technique, he would be able to reach the demigod's body in a single step. However, and Lin was unable to use any spell techniques, and his legs immediately gave way as he collapsed to the ground. So satisfying. And Lin lay sprawled on the ground as he murmured to himself. His entire soul was trembling, as if it were being ravaged by some kind of power, sending it straight to a euphoric climax. That's right, this process wasn't painful at all. It was too satisfying. And Lin was so satisfied that he lost all of his combat prowess. The gargantuan demigod's body lay silently on the ground, releasing a peculiar light, as if it were silently mocking Lin for overestimating himself. And Lin finally understood the hidden difficulty of this mission. This was a place that contained a special law, a place that could make the souls of all living beings feel extremely good after entering. The reason for all of this was most likely this demigod's body,